What's up? What's happening? Still is the Hoffman Show. Yeah, I'm back. I still do the show. They didn't just keep the name, and then I disappeared. That was only for a couple days. But we're back. What's up? Live from Indianapolis at the NFL Scouting Combine. An annual tradition here on the show. Very excited to be back for one of these days. I'll count and figure out how many years in a row I've been here. Probably just go back in my hotel reservation, see how many weekends I got the same hotel I stay in every single year here in Indianapolis. It's a place that the NFL has called home for this event for basically its entire history. It's always really good. It's just kind of a fun thing to be at because I have so many great friends in the media business, obviously, that are here, and we'll have a ton of them on the show over the next couple of days. Actually just got done. It was very funny. Brooke Pryor, for the second straight year, joined me, and this year Dan Pizzuta joined as well for our NFL Reporter Roundtable. So that was like a 40-minute conversation about a bunch of cool, fun NFL topics that we'll be sharing with you over the next couple of days. If you're watching on the YouTube stream, you see Andrew Siciliano wandering behind me. He's going to pop over here at either 4:30 or 4:35, depending on what's going on with his schedule and the work he's doing with the Cleveland Browns. But he's now the voice of the Browns on the radio side, so we'll talk about the Myles Garrett stuff and what Andrew Berry, their GM, said today with him. ESPN's Jordan Reid is going to be by in about 10 minutes, and but it is just, this is the Combine. There's people walking around everywhere. JP's floating around. He's going to join us later on in the show to talk about the John Allen news. So it's a fun place to be, and I'm excited to be back for whatever number year this is. We've been here every year that this show has been on the air. So this is year number 3 in a row for the Hoffman Show, and excited again. I'll say this one more time, and then we'll get things started here. I'm excited to be here. Anthony, I'm excited to be back with you, even though you cannot seem to figure out your camera. What happened while I was gone? Why can't you're adjusting lights? You don't look like a silhouette anymore, so that's good.
I'm trying to figure out what the lighting situation is. So we have a new computer in my studio. So I could just move this camera.
You move the camera over there. Now that looks much more like what it used to look like. And we're getting Anthony all set up. How am I more set up in Indianapolis when I've been here? I landed 4 hours ago. And I'm more set up than the place that you work every single day.
Well, I mean, there was somebody else in here before me, so I only have 5 minutes to.
They don't use the video setup, Anthony. I guess you haven't used it since this new computer came in because I've been out.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I see. Anyway, right before I landed today, unfortunately I missed this, but Adam Peters spoke. The big story for the Commanders today is that Jonathan Allen has apparently been given permission to pursue a trade. And this, I think we all thought was coming, because this is what happens before you cut a guy. And just bluntly, John Allen, for where this team is in their build and where they're at contractually with him, where he has in terms of dead money and all that kind of stuff left versus cap savings, and the fact that they drafted his replacement last year. And while I think he played well when he came back from injury, it wasn't at a level where you're like, oh my God, this guy's irreplaceable. We can't possibly not keep Jonathan Allen. And I also do wonder from a culture standpoint, this is a guy that was a part of stuff for a long time that, that there wasn't a winning culture. And I know he's from Alabama and he's team captain. I think John was a lot more, a guy that I don't think John was contributing to a lot of the bad stuff that was happening. And I mean the on the field bad stuff, to be very, very clear. He clearly was not a force enough, for instance, to get Chase Young and Montez Sweat on the track that apparently everyone wanted them to be on. And specifically Chase, I think, more than Montez. And it's like, you're a leader, and we got that kind of these kind of issues. We got guys not playing the team way, and the guys that aren't playing the team way are your room, and you're one of the guys that's freelancing from time to time. So, I just wonder, because at times it certainly, the way that they played the run in certain situations, for instance, this year was different with John than it was without John. Why is that? Why is John Allen doing stuff that other people aren't doing? And so I do wonder from whether it was a technique thing where he's just like, I would rather play it this way, and clearly they wanted everyone else doing it something else. And they're, it's like, hey man, if it's going to work and you're going to be an all-pro, then sick, or a Pro Bowler, then sick. We'll let you do whatever you want. Versus I don't want to do it that way. Let's try my way. And the team was like, okay. Like, I don't know what version of all that stuff was. All I can tell you is there were clear differences in how John wanted to play, and I think how they played without John. And I would be surprised if that wasn't a factor in the, yes, if you can go find a trade where we can get compensation for you, because we're probably going to cut you anyway because you save us $16 million on the cap and we don't really want you anymore. Let's just say I'd be surprised if that wasn't a factor as well. So that's definitely the big news of the day, and we'll talk about that much more with JP coming up. And then I think what that does is then gets into a larger cap conversation about, okay, now this is a team that was going to have $80 million in cap space roughly with the new salary cap numbers that were announced last week. And instead of that, they're going to have closer to $100 million, whether they trade or release Allen. But the numbers work basically the same either way. I think, I'm trying to remember, no, because this is his last year, so it's not even a pre-post first designation. Like, I think it's $16 million in cap savings, and there's some dead money, but like it's $16 million in cap savings, and what can you do with that extra money? I mean, that's a pretty good wide receiver too. That is, a really good corner. Like if you want to get, I don't think that's going to get you all the way to like DJ Reid, for instance, who I think most people consider the best corner on the market and a top 5 free agent. But like, does that get you most of the way there for his average annual value? Yeah, probably. And like, especially in year one, where you're trying to balance this cap with the need that, as Adam Peters talked about today, they want to bring back a ton of guys because they need to. They got, I think it's 28 free agents. So what this does is it allows you, yes, you have one more spot you want to fill. But think of how well this team did in free agency last year, and especially bargain bin shopping. If you can get 4 $4 million players or 1 John Allen, even if John's good, I think you might make the case that it's worth the $4 million players, the way that their $4 million players played in 2024. So I think that flexibility was inevitable. I think this day was inevitable. It's a headline because it happened. It's a storyline because it's now happening. But we will obviously see if John gets traded, and I wouldn't expect much. I think that's the funny thing. Trade John Allen for Myles Garrett. And it's like those two sides of the balance, or not the balance beam. What do they call these things? The seesaw. Those are Myles Garrett's going to send John Allen off the seesaw. So don't expect anything more than maybe a conditional, I wouldn't say a 7th, but like a conditional 6th. Maybe that can get to a 5th, maybe a 4th if he has like a double-digit sack season or something crazy, and re-signs an extension next offseason. Like maybe there's a way that the Commanders can get something, but I don't think that it'll be a lot, and I think it'll be probably teams just being like, we're not really going to trade for him. We'll compete for him on the open market, and we'll see what kind of deal John signs, assuming that he's going to be a free agent when free agency opens, and they're going to move on if they don't find a trade, or now apparently that he doesn't find a trade because he's got permission to go seek one. All right, that is the top story of the day. We'll do more story time from Indianapolis a little bit later in the show. But we are live in Indy at the NFL Scouting Combine. And in this chair right here, I'm going to turn this camera a little bit, get everything set up for an old two-shot, because Jordan Reid, at ESPN NFL Draft Analyst, is set to join us next here on The Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We are always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are streaming live on YouTube too at the Team 980, where you see ESPN's Jordan Reid with us, NFL draft analyst, properly dressed as television's Jordan Reid. Yeah. Wearing that suit. What do you keep count of the interviews, or you just prefer not?
Oh, I call it the car wash. You just go through it, hope for the best, and once you come out clean. Yeah,
hey, looking clean so far. So I don't know how many more you got, but you're almost there, looking clean, all as well. So when we did this last year, very different discussion for Washington at number 2 versus at number 29. When you look back at last year's class, though, and you think about how you evaluated those quarterbacks, then you saw how they played, and then, it's 1 year. And as much as I think Washington fans want to beat their chest and be like, we got the best one, and you very well might have. It's still a long way to go in these guys' careers. But, like, how did such a prolific quarterback class change it all the way that you look at that position? I know this year's a weaker class, but, like, change the way you look at quarterbacks moving forward.
Well, I mean, that class was absolutely phenomenal. I mean, it wasn't just the 3 at the top. I thought once Penix got in there, he played well, and then also Bo Nix. How about Bo Nix and how well that he played? And it's not a surprise that the two quarterbacks that played the most reps in college, those were the ones that translated the quickest on the next level. Speaking of Jaden and then also Bo Nix as well. So there's never a such thing as too many reps as a quarterback, especially in college. We're seeing guys preferably go back to school now as opposed to coming out, just because of NIL. But last year's class I thought was absolutely terrific. It definitely lived up to the hype.
The one question I'm going to ask everybody that comes through whatever stop on the car wash this is this week is – like, is there anything from seeing how Washington built such a successful team last year, considering how much change there was, right, and how they went about their business and the way they messaged things that was very clear? Like, is there something you learn or take away about team building that was either clarified or that you learned from watching what Washington did last year?
Well, the one thing I will say about Adam Peters' first draft is that he took guys that were ready to play right now. Looking at guys like a Jaden Daniels or a Mike Sainristil, Johnny Newton, once he did get healthy. Right. Just playing or taking guys that were ready to play right away. That's something that I really noticed, especially the early round picks, because those guys were contributors right away. And these were players that we were sitting here 365 days ago talking about that were the most pro-ready players. I had first-round grades on Johnny Newton when he was coming out. And then Sainristil, it seems like universally was loved by everybody.
Yeah. For sure. And I think that's the thing for me is like the character side of it. And I know that's something that, especially for someone like you this week, you're talking to your scouting buddies and trying to get kind of the vibe on all those guys. ESPN's Jordan Reid with us here on the Hoffman Show. So when we look at this year's class for Washington at 29, offensive tackle, edge, it seems like even though some people don't love this class as a whole, for Washington's needs and kind of where it is, it lines up. Is that how you see it?
I kind of see it differently. First thing I will say is that at 29 probably feels very weird to you guys because you're looking at mock drafts usually in October or November.
It's a lot more scrolling on like your mock and everybody else. I'm like, dang, my finger's tired. It's a lot more scrolling down this year.
But for their needs specifically at edge and then also corner, I think this draft class aligns very favorably for them just because this defensive line class, not only an edge rusher, but overall is absolutely loaded. So there's going to be some good players for them at 29, maybe somebody like a James Pierce Jr. Out of Tennessee, a Nick Scorton out of Texas A&M, and there's plenty of other names that come to mind that could be there for them at the back end of the first round. And also at corner, the great thing for Washington is that there's a huge cluster for me of early second-round grades in this year's draft class. Benjamin Morrison out of Notre Dame, Azarie Thomas out of Florida State is another name that's getting a lot of buzz, Maxwell Hairston out of Kentucky. So there's a lot of names that's kind of jumbled up in that same cluster behind Travis Hunter and Will Johnson in this year's class.
So of the edge guys, let's start there. Is there one of those that really sticks out as knowing, again, that they like competitiveness is their number one trait? Like they want those dog mentality type of guys. Is there one guy or a couple guys in that edge class that really stand out to you as like that guy's a commander?
Yeah, if we're looking for guys, maybe not necessarily at 29, but maybe day 2, Jack Sawyer out of Ohio State is one that immediately comes to mind that just has that dog mentality, that's pro-ready right now, somebody that's has so much success at Ohio State. We saw what he was able to do during his career and even in the college football playoff where he really blew up in a sense, really won the national title game for them. So he definitely is one. Another, if they're looking for one at 29, just mention him, James Pierce Jr. Out of Tennessee. Depending on how they feel about him fitting in schematically, I definitely think that he could replace that Dante Fowler type of role in the defense.
Jordan Reid, ESPN NFL draft analyst, with us here on the Hoffman Show. I'm glad you said the day 2 thing too, because I think that is like Jaden broke all of our brains this year in Washington because rookies aren't supposed to do that. They're not supposed to play at an MVP type level or at whatever that version for their position, right? Quarterback, it's an MVP type level, offensive, defensive player of the year type level at other positions. So when you look at, okay, maybe what pattern you notice is they want guys that are more pro-ready. If you look at either the edge, the corner, or the tackle class, is there somebody that stands out on that realm where it's like first, second day, maybe it doesn't have to be 29, maybe it's day, because they also have that mid-round, a third-rounder from Miami, or Miami's third-rounder in the Eagles trade with Jahan Dotson last year. Is there somebody that or a couple guys that really stand out as pro-ready, ready to play now, even if maybe the ceiling's a little lower or whatever it is that might be the limiting factor in them?
I'll let you pick a position. What position would you say? Let's
go tackle, because I think that they might need one to start this year. They probably won't leave themselves empty-handed in free agency. That's not how Adam does business. But, if they can get a guy who can play right tackle and replace Andrew Wiley, they'd probably take it.
Yeah. So 2 guys really come to mind on day 2. The first one is Jonah Savanea. He's an offensive tackle / guard out of Arizona. Very strong, has a great build, about 6'3", 330 pounds. Has experience primarily at right tackle, but has sprinkled in at some guard as well. So he's definitely one. And then another is Emory Jones, who's an offensive tackle out of LSU that's primarily played right tackle during his career, but I believe he's a guard on the next level. So both of those guys really scream commander types of players to me, just because very experienced, but also they're versatile, which is what we saw with Brandon Coleman a year ago. And we were sitting here 365 days ago saying, who were some body types that potentially could fit in with the Commanders, and he was one that we listed.
So with Coleman, I'm just curious, having watched him in college and seeing what he did, did he exceed your expectations at left tackle? And then what do you do with that information? Because it still is a conversation of, do you, even after 1 year where he was I think by most accounts, pretty good at the very least, do you just keep running that experiment out, or do you kick him inside and go somewhere else?
Well, I was stunned that they actually went into the year as him being the unquestioned starter at left tackle, just because there were some question marks about him, especially being a day 2 pick, a third-round pick, if he could come in and play right away. But I've always had the belief that if you are debating if a guy is a tackle or a guard, allow them to show you that they cannot play tackle first before you kick them inside to guard, just because tackle is such a valuable position. I'm going to allow that guy to show me that he's not capable of playing on the island first before I kick him inside.
The running back class is another place that I've got circled for Washington, especially that 3rd, 4th round range. I know this class is absolutely loaded, but if I tell you, hey, Jordan, I want someone that's going to add serious juice, playmaking juice in that 3rd, 4th round range, who are the names that then come to mind?
Dylan Sampson out of Tennessee is one that I think would fit really well as that combination with Brian Robinson, a bit of a change-up. He's more of your dynamic, shifty type of runner. Was the SEC Offensive Player of the Year this year. Vision is terrific. And then another is Devin Neal out of Kansas. He's another that I think is that shorter, stockier, banger in between the tackles, but I think he's scheme versatile. And then another that I will say is Brashard Smith out of SMU. He's another that originally was a receiver at Miami 2 years ago and then transferred to SMU and actually transitioned to running back. So he's another that brings a lot of juice. He reminds me a lot of Tyrone Tracy, and we saw what he was able to do with the New York Giants.
Jordan Reid, ESPN, with us for another 2 minutes or so here on the Hoffman Show. All right, so when you get to the weekend and the actual workouts, are there 1 or 2 guys that I can't wait to see how this guy runs, or a measurement that you're waiting on for a guy that maybe you like him a little bit more than others and you just need that time to confirm it, or for whatever reason that you just are really anxious or looking forward to the testing this weekend?
Well, one for me is Nick Emanwori. He's a safety out of South Carolina. I believe he's going to be the talk of the combine when we look back on the combine, and he's going to come in. He's going to be about 6'3", 230 pounds. He's going to jump probably 40-plus in the vertical. He's going to jump over 11 feet in the broad jump, and he's probably going to run in the high 4.3s. So he's going to be a freak show.
Yeah.
He's going to be a freak show.
That's almost the craziest thing. I was going to say it's LeBron level, except for LeBron does all of that at 6'9".
Right.
So just a reminder of who LeBron James is. And then last thing, I always love asking the draft guys this question: like, who's your guy in the draft? Who's the guy that you're just like, that's my favorite? When if I could just flip on the tape of any dude in the draft, that's the guy I'm going to spend my time watching.
You may call me a cop-out for this answer, but it's Travis Hunter, man. Like,
That's a lot of tape to watch.
I just think he's such a rare player, and he reminds me a lot of Champ Bailey when he was coming out of Georgia in the late 90s. And, you know, Champ averaged over 100 snaps a game when he was coming out. He actually played both ways. Travis averaged over 115 snaps a game, but it's very rare to see a guy not only play one side of the ball at a high level, but transition over and play the other side of the ball at even a higher level. And if it were me, I would play him at corner full time, and I would sprinkle him in maybe 20 to 25 plays a game as a receiver. But I just think this dude is so rare, and whoever takes him is going to be very happy.
It's not a bad answer at all. Plus, then you get, watch one player. I get some offense, get some defense. It's not a cop-out. It's thinking man right there. ESPN's Jordan Reid. At the rate we're going, I'll see you next year, about the same time, same place. More from Indianapolis next on the Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show. We are live from the Scouting Combine in Indianapolis, the 2025 Scouting Combine, where we will see none of the top quarterbacks work out again. Something we might talk about a little later in the week, but we will have plenty to talk about as all the executives and coaches and everybody speaks to the media, and that definitely has already started to happen, including Adam Peters today. Tomorrow, 1 o'clock, you'll hear it at the top of Russell's show. Dan Quinn will speak. But for now, let's let you hear some of what Adam Peters had to say. I do think Andrew Siciliano might be popping by here in a few minutes. I see him back behind me now, so we'll see if Siciliano is able to swing by and talk a little bit about Myles Garrett and the Browns and what that situation is after Andrew Berry, their GM, spoke today. But today, Adam Peters speaking not only to the at the podium where most executives do some kind of podium session, but also speaking to a group of reporters that made the trip to Indy here from DC. First, let's just start though with one from the podium, because the story of the day was John Allen asking for a trade and being given permission to seek one, and obviously that was one of the first things that Peters was asked.
They're always these kind of decisions and things you have to come up with are always tough, right? And with John, who's been a great player as a commander, as a football teamer and a Redskin, he's been a great person for this franchise for a long time. So you have to weigh in everything, and we looked at internally and okay, what decision we want to make that we think is best for the team, but also you want to do what's best for that player. So those are tough conversations to have, but you always want to have him civilly, and we have, and his agent's been really good with us, and look forward to coming to a resolution.
So that's the latest on that. Like, it's tough conversation, but it's going to be one that they have, and I think if they don't find a trade that, as I talked about off the top of the show today, I think that he will ultimately be gone. Just real quick to follow up on that, what led to the decision to let John ultimately seek this trade?
Hold on.
In a holding pattern. The Anthony Haney holding pattern. The infamous Anthony Haney holding pattern. Anthony, do we have this bite? Okay, yeah. We do have this bite. 3, 2, 1, and fire away.
Yeah, that is true. We have done that, and with John, he's
I don't know who was going to that one.
Been a great commander, a great person for this franchise, and he's going into the last year of his deal, and wanted to give him and his representation, Blake Baratz, who's a really good agent, they just talked about it and said wanted to be able to explore opportunities, and so we let them do that, and we're staying in contact with them nearly every day. Just texted with them this morning, and really everything's still on the table in terms of whether it's a trade or staying here or whatever. So we're still going through that. It's kind of early in the stages. We haven't done a lot of exploring yet, but that's kind of where we're at right now.
I think it's kind of funny, just knowing how the combine works, and agents are out and execs are out and everyone's here. They're all having dinner in the same places around downtown Indy and whatever. So I imagine Adam being texting Blake this morning and being like, "Hey, did you find a trade last night? As you were at dinner, did somebody come over and say, 'Hey, I want John Allen? Let me call Adam?'" It's probably funny to people who cover the combine and nobody else. Anthony, was that funny to you? Knowing a little bit how the combine works?
A little bit.
Remember, the combine is a place where Jay Gruden once signed an extension at 4 a.m. in a bar.
That too.
So the idea of, hey, let me check in and see if my guy found a trade last night, that's not incredibly far-fetched. All right, we're going to audible because Andrew Siciliano is going to come over, and we're going to transition live on the fly here. I'm going to turn the camera. Andrew's going to sit down, and we're just going to go live on the fly here with Andrew Siciliano. Of course, he's a Reston native, so he's a DMV guy. Have you sit down there, sir.
Greetings.
Right. Greetings, everybody, from Andrew Siciliano. 2, he is now the play-by-play voice of the Cleveland Browns. So, what could I possibly ask you about between the old Commanders and the Cleveland Browns? Is anybody talking about anything with
They're
potentially?
not trading him.
So that was what Andrew
Next
Barry.
question.
Yeah, that's what Andrew Barry said today from the Browns side of it. I mean, obviously, the simple answer is he's Myles freaking Garrett. He's a great player, but why are they just so shut down? Like, even though the value where they are in terms of their team building, what is it on the Browns internally that they're like, nope, he still fits our window of where we want to be?
Because they think they're still in the window. I mean, easiest answer. We're in March now. We're in February. Look, 13 months ago they were in the playoffs. 13 months ago, they played their worst defensive game of the year in Houston in the postseason. Look, that game's over. I'm not saying they woulda, shoulda, coulda won, but they were close. They thought that they could have made a run, right? They had Flacco playing well. Like, we have the number one defense in football. We can make a run. A lot has changed. They've gotten older. They've gotten more expensive, certainly, since then. Obviously, Deshaun Watson is injured, and he's likely not going to play this year. There are a lot of layers here. But they do believe that they are a quarterback away from being a really good team again. Now, there are others who will say, no, you're not. But they think that they are. Myles was the number one overall pick in 2017. He is quite literally the greatest defensive player to ever wear that team's uniform. One should argue. Clay Matthews, one of my favorite players. Hanford Dixon, one of my favorite players. They've been other great defensive players over the years. But Myles Garrett's that guy. And they don't want to trade him. Look, if someone were to call up and say, here's 2 number ones and a 3, look, would they have to listen? Yes, it is Andrew Barry's job to listen. Right now, they're not inclined to trade him. I think what they do is put in front of him, the biggest contract ever for a defensive player and basically say, do you really not want this contract?
So, getting to know Myles a little bit in the role that you have, like it's easy for him to say, as he has, it's not about the money, and he kind of fired back at the Cleveland and Canton thing and whatever. It's easier to say when the money's not in front of you, and covering the league like you have for as long as you have, getting to know Myles like you have. The money's not the problem in Cleveland. They will put that contract in front of him. Do you think that he will? Once he has it, be like, okay, we're good? Or do you think that it's going to be like an uncomfortable training camp and then it goes whatever way it goes?
I don't know what it's going to look like in July.
Yeah.
That I don't know. But I do know, and I do believe, Myles, that it isn't just – it really is, I want to win it. I don't necessarily think that we can turn it around. Now, the Commanders well know, and Commanders fans know, and Texans fans know that the last 2 teams to pick number 2 overall took a quarterback and immediately made it back to the postseason. Obviously, the Commanders almost made it back to the Super Bowl. And I think Browns fans and I think the Browns front office go, hey, look, this can be done. And I also think, though, they need to pragmatically look at their roster and know, and they do know this, that we've gotten older. Right now we're not in good cap position, unlike the Commanders. This is not as simple as, hey, get the right quarterback and bam, book your ticket to Santa Clara. It's not an easy fix, but if you get the quarterback right, it feels a lot better.
For sure. Andrew Siciliano, play-by-play voice on the radio for the Cleveland Browns. Also, you hear him NBC and all other kinds of places with us here on the Hoffman Show. Obviously, the general consensus is that this, like the CJ, the Jaden, doesn't exist in this draft.
Right.
They might like one of those guys, and they might ultimately wind up being right. But if you're going to say that the window is now, there's also the pursuit of another veteran option. Like, what options do you think exist for them? What are the different pathways?
Sure.
Obviously, take QB at 1 or at 2. That's one option. Mm-hmm. What else exists for them?
I think they're going to sign one and draft one. I think that's a fair assumption. The question is, who do they sign or trade for? There's going to be a veteran and there's going to be a rookie. Right now, Dorian Thompson-Robinson's the only quarterback really on the roster. I like him a lot. He has had a few chances. We haven't necessarily seen it. Preseason has been great, though. So they're going to get a veteran and get a rookie. The question is, do you get like a Daniel Jones, and he's the bridge, and then you draft a guy at 2? There's also a world where there's a Kirk Cousins, and you draft a guy at 2. This time, though, with full clarity.
Kirk would know what's going on this time.
Full clarity.
Yeah.
And Kevin Stefanski obviously has the relationship with Kirk from Minnesota. There's also a world in which you get that bridge and you draft a quarterback in the 2nd and 3rd round. You go, I'm not convinced that one of these 2 is the guy. I'd rather roll with Kyle McCord or Jackson Dart or Will Howard Dillon Gabriel's a darn good quarterback. He's my size, but he's a darn good quarterback.
Well, you have a couple of these guys that have played a lot too, and that's what we saw last year.
Much like Bo Nix. Dillon Gabriel broke Bo Nix's starting record.
Obviously Miles is the big name that everyone else in the other league is like circling like vultures around. But because of the Browns cap situations, are there other names, whether it's a Denzel Ward or whoever, that people should say like, hey, this is a good football player, but because of where the Browns are, tough decisions they are going to have to make, this guy might become available as Commanders fans, for instance, look towards free agency?
I would say Denzel's not one of them. They don't want to get rid of Denzel. Denzel's also an expensive player who was drafted in 2018. Has been well compensated. He is coming off. He should have been first-team All-Pro. I'm Team Pat Surtain here. Denzel Ward had a bleeping amazing season. They're not getting rid of him. Jack Conklin,
Offensive
he
line,
played some really good football when he finally got healthy last year at right tackle. He's got a 3 in front of his age, and he's got a big price tag. They would like to keep him, but they're going to have to do some financial gymnastics. Wyatt Teller, local guy, Virginia Tech guy. I think they would like to redo his deal and probably keep him around. Joel Bitonio's got a decision to make. He may retire. He said 2 days ago he was in the Browns building at an event and said, I'm leaning one way. I'll make my decision soon. So, he's not Joel Bitonio. Joel Bitonio's not going anywhere, but Jack Conklin might be an interesting one.
Obviously, Deshaun.
Obo Okoronkwo, you need another edge rusher? He could be had.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Washington does.
I'm guessing he could be had.
Obviously, Watson's play, incredibly disappointing for Cleveland. But there's also just kind of the way that it fit with Stefanski. And it just didn't look like the offense in the way that it did when Flacco was operating it. Or certainly if you go back to what Kevin was doing in Minnesota. When they look at their next quarterback, because I think of what happened with Jaden and Cliff and the synergy this year, how do they – or, how I would say how loud is Kevin's voice in making sure that, like, we're not going to go – chasing a talent that doesn't necessarily work with me versus where Andrew Berry is trying to look for a larger piece or, that GM wider view.
Yeah, no, he has a very, very, very loud voice in this, and he and AB are on the same page. They're not, believe me, this is not going to be a thing where AB is like, I like this quarterback, and Kevin says, I don't like that quarterback, and they take him at 2. That ain't going to happen at all.
Yeah.
I think if you look at the hires in the offseason, Tommy Reese going from tight end coach to OC, but more importantly, Bill Musgrave, who's been there, various roles, going to QB coach, and the one that's under the radar is Mike Bloomgren, who is the former Rice head coach.
Okay,
is the Browns' new O-line coach. He's a Bill Callahan disciple from the Jets. Obviously, Callahan was the guy for years and left and went to Tennessee. He also was on the staff with David Shaw and Harbaugh at Stanford, where they ran power 19 times in a row. So that's getting back to Stefanski's identity. And to your point, look, they've been able to find ways to win with P.J. Walker, with Joe Flacco. The one that still hurts is the Nick Mullins game rescheduled on a Wednesday against the Raiders. If they'd only pulled that one off, they might have made the playoffs in whatever year that was, 22. But they have won with a lot of different quarterbacks there, found a way. And so they're confident that they can get back there. They just got to find the right guy.
Andrew Siciliano with us here on the Hoffman Show. So this is kind of all the big picture kind of look at this leads into the question that I'm asking everyone who sits down. And that is watching how Washington was able to do what they did this year.
Yeah, I loved it, by the way.
I'm sure you
loved
did.
it. Yeah, loved it. Loved it for everybody back home. Awesome. Yeah. So happy.
So seeing how they did it, because they have the 4 pillars of your franchise. They basically replaced all last year. Owner, GM, head coach, quarterback. Yeah. But there's also a way they went about it. And for me, it was very eye-opening to see it happen right in front of my eyes. To be like, oh, this thing I've always thought about football, that's true. Or I actually need to pay more attention over here.
Look, team building, it works.
I was going to say, what about the way Washington built what they built either really clarified something for you or you learned about team building in the NFL?
Look, you can turn it around quickly. 35, you knew that, but this is a great example. 35 straight years now. 35. You've had at least 4 new teams make the postseason that didn't make it the year before. They did it themselves. They did it with the right quarterback. And with really, they didn't spend They didn't spend like a kid who stole mom's credit card. They spent, and they spent wisely. They brought in one of my favorite humans in the NFL, and Bobby Wagner, right? You already had, I think it helped a lot that you had such a great pillar in the locker room and in the community like Terry McLaurin on the other side of the ball already there, right? You had pieces, and then you added good people, good character people, and darn good players, right? And Adam Peters is on the podium. I don't know if you guys took the whole thing or played the whole thing, but somebody asked him near the end, like, hey, because you have such a strong foundation, might you take a risk on a red flag guy in this year's draft because you feel like you have the foundation to support that player? And he didn't necessarily say yes, but he conceded, like, that's an interesting thought about just the way team building. But the good, whatever he said, they have that base,
right?
And that's awesome. And I'll share. I had a conversation with Bobby Wagner at the Super Bowl in New Orleans, where I was just like, hey, like, thank you for, as someone who grew up there, for like being part of something that, like, I have a 10-year-old nephew. Like, you could be proud of this team, right? Like, you could say that's Bobby Wagner, that's Terry McLaurin, that's Jaden Daniels. Not that they're the only three, but those are three shining examples of like how to carry yourself. And you're also really darn good at football. Like, like, thank you for being that for like my 10-year-old nephew.
I feel like there's so many of us that have been around that feel the same way. And it's just like, even just me doing the show every day, it's like, oh, these guys are worth talking about.
Yeah.
It's a completely different way to exist. And
totally.
I very much wish that for the good people of Cleveland as well.
Look,
I hope that it works out.
Miles, by the way, is that guy.
Yeah.
Miles is awesome.
Well, that's the thing when we've talked about it. I know
Denzel Ward is that guy.
Well,
awesome.
I've talked
Joel
about that
Bitonio
actually,
is that guy.
Those two guys specifically because of the trade rumors with
Nick
Washington,
Chubb.
whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, people will be like, oh, well, is Myles Garrett a commander? And it's like, yeah.
Yes.
It was like, he's asking for a trade. It's like, yeah, because he wants to win, and he's been there, he's done his time.
He'd fit on every team in the NFL.
But I think especially with what they look for off the field, the way he is in the locker room, like everything I've ever heard about Myles Garrett, A-plus guy.
Yeah. The Browns do have those foundational pieces like that. Joel Bitonio, Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward, Nick Chubb. Like, I mean, Nick Chubb might be like the hardest working, greatest citizen in the NFL. Like, I mean, I can't even begin to put into words that guy.
Yeah.
He doesn't talk. Like, he's like that. Art Monk didn't talk either.
Yes.
Right? But he is that, like, not all leaders are loud. There's like that leading by example thing.
Yeah.
Kind of corny it over it. It isn't with him.
Except for when
at all.
You hit it right. And Nick Chubb sounds like he's one of those guys.
Yes, absolutely. I'm off on a tangent here.
Andrew Siciliano, you can he's the play-by-play voice of the Browns, doing a bunch of stuff with their radio and all that kind of stuff. So if you want more on the Cleveland side of it, where can people check out more analysis and everything on what Andrew Barry said today?
I'm doing a bunch of stuff with them this week on clevelandbrowns.com or just my Twitter. Common spelling, Siciliano, Andrew Siciliano.
There you go. Andrew Siciliano, everybody. More from Indianapolis next here on the Team 980.
You can listen to the Team 980.
All right, it's the Hoffman Show. This is the Combine, everybody. We're live at the Indianapolis Scouting Combine, NFL Combine, a.k.a. you know the deal. Andrew Siciliano, great, giving perspective from the Browns side of things on the Myles Garrett trade and the fact that they are not going to trade him and why, what their thinking is. So really, really good stuff from Andrew. Also talking a little bit about the Commanders, of course, his hometown team from growing up, as he mentioned. One more bite that we want to play before the end of the hour, and then we're actually going to play a little bit of Take Command for you at 5 o'clock before JP Finlay joins at 5:30, because I want to also make sure that we're hitting. It's funny because the Combine is two things happening at once. There's like the media side where there's all these rumors and, you know, Myles Garrett is the number one story. And then there's also like, hey, by the way, at the core of this is an NFL scouting event. And Logan and I talked actually last night. We recorded before I left, and I literally landed from Phoenix on one flight, went upstairs to my studio, recorded with Logan, went to bed, got up, and got on this flight to come here today. So in that in-between time, we recorded a pod talking about what we're looking for this week on the scouting side of it. So I don't want to lose that side of it on top of the great folks that we'll have tomorrow. Like we got Charles Davis and a bunch of others who do a lot of the scouting work. So we'll get into some of that. We had Jordan Reid earlier in the hour. But I will, we're going to play a little bit of that for you next. I also want to get into this a little bit later on in the show as well. Adam Peters asked this question about the trade market from Sam Fortier today.
Do you feel like you have enough draft capital where if you wanted to make a significant trade that you would still be able to build through the draft?
Like what? No.
You tell me.
I mean, there's always gonna be trade-offs if you do something like that. And we have 7 picks, and so it's a full allotment. It's not our own 7 picks, but I think it just goes back to Sam just always doing what we think is best for the team.
So there you go, the standard Adam Peters answer of best for the team, but that wasn't a no, and certainly it seems like Adam's brain might have gone to something on the trade market. So we're going to talk about that answer a little bit later in the show. We'll talk about the John Allen news as well as the trade market stuff with JP Finlay coming up live at 5:30, as JP is also broadcasting live for his show here in Indianapolis at the Scouting Combine. And then we'll see what the 6 o'clock hour holds as well. There's a bunch of people floating around. Might see who else wants to come and yap into microphones. I know Stanig and I were chatting about maybe doing something, so we'll see if Ben wants to swing through at 6 o'clock. And maybe Fortier himself. So also, he's in charge of my dinner plans tonight, so I need to check in with Fortier on that. Maybe that's an off-the-air conversation. But we've got plenty of show still to come. And as I said, tomorrow is just absolutely loaded with guests, so pretty excited about that tomorrow. But plenty of good stuff still to come here today from Indianapolis, including a combine, like actual draft stuff preview with Logan next here on the Team 980. Hour number 2 of the Hoffman Show. We are live in Indianapolis at the NFL Scouting Combine. JP Finlay is going to join us live on set here in about 30 minutes. Tuesday is always a fun one here at the Combine. It's kind of a local day. You get all the, you get some of the big stories that start to emerge, and obviously the Commanders are at the center of a bunch of rumors. And you got the John Allen thing that came out earlier today, where he's been given permission to request a trade. So we'll talk about all that with JP and potentially some others coming up later on in the show. But right now, the whole scouting combine portion of it, like the actual scouting combine, not all the media circus and the rumors and the agents and the execs and everybody that's co-mingling here in Indianapolis, that part. What are we looking forward to with that? And by we, I mean me and Logan Paulson. That was the subject of a special pre-combine edition of Take Command, which we're going to let you listen to part of right now.
It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulson and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
What's up? What's happening? Welcome in. It's Take Command. Logan Paulson there. Craig Hoffman here. Slightly abbreviated episode because we are squeezing this one in, Logan, literally between flights for me. I came home just to do this podcast.
It's wild, man. Your schedule is pretty crazy at the moment. And, my schedule is getting pretty crazy too. It's combine season. We're all moving around doing things. But we're here for the content is really what we're doing.
We are here for the content. We're going to try to answer one or two mailbag questions, but we're also going to preview the combine here to begin. And the reason that we are doing this now, we're actually full transparency, recording this on Monday night. So this will hit your feeds Tuesday morning. And there's a good chance that as many of you listen to this, I'm either on the way to the airport or in the air on the way to Indianapolis for the combine. We can also tell you that later in the week, we'll have a great chat with Trevor Sikkema. He's agreed to come on the show while we're out there in Indy, so we'll get that done, and then we'll do some kind of combine recap. We are still trying to figure out if we can do our traditional crossover podcast with our Train with the Best pod, the fitness podcast I do with Chris Gorez that we do every year. We should do that, whether we actually thread the needle of doing that in person. We've gotten a couple of interesting mailbag questions on the fitness/football crossover front, so I think we're going to do that episode no matter what, whether it's in Indy in person or not is a giant TBD, because as we started here, Logan, the schedule's they're nuts. Yeah. So, all right. Let me just super broad. What are you looking forward to this week at the Combine? There's all the individual testing. There's obviously all the trade rumors and free agent rumors that are going to come out on the media side. But like for you, when you go to Indy, you're going to actually watch the workouts. Yeah. You're there as like a scouting type. That is the way your brain is wired this time of year. What are you looking for in Indy?
Yeah, and I think, it's interesting because the earlier you go, it's kind of more for the relationship elements, right? So you get to see coaches, scouts, you get to kind of be at the hotel, you go out to the bars, everyone's hanging out, you get to kind of have your relationships with your analytics guys, just kind of building your network. And then as the week goes on, more and more people leave. And again, so I'm kind of one of the few, the proud that stay for the workouts. And the workouts to me are fun because it's a unique way to provide content. I think, one of the things about the Senior Bowl, one of the things about the Combine is it is through a very specific lens. Like when you're there in person, you see things that don't come up. Like I forget the guy, but last year someone tested really, really well and they didn't talk about him on the television show at all, because they have their kind of, Daniel Jeremiah does such a great job. I mean, he really does a fantastic job. I
think there's 319 kids working out this year. So there's not going to get everybody.
Yeah. And so what he does is he kind of says, hey man, these are the 5 guys I'm looking at. And the broadcast does a great job of highlighting those 5 guys. They highlight them in the drills, they highlight them in the vertical, they highlight them in the 40. But there's other guys that are kind of lower down the board, 3rd, 4th, 5th round guys that test really well, measure well. You get to kind of see them interact with the group at a high level, and you say, man, these are the guys that maybe the Commanders. It kind of just flushes out your draft evaluation. Maybe kind of says, I got to go back to my notebook on some of these guys. So to me, that's a really fun day. I go sit in Lucas Oil Stadium. Me and my producer, just the guy Jason, we do Ticket to the Draft podcast through the team. We do a podcast every day there, and we just kind of recap all the drills, who stood out, who disappointed, who do we got to go back and watch. And that is it's a really kind of just football nerd thing. It's like when you go to the Senior Bowl, it's like that same type of thing. You're just watching ball. So taking notes on the drills, who looked good in the gauntlet, who didn't look good, who ran well. And then I think I heard someone articulate this on a podcast I was listening to. I don't remember who, but it's just a kind of way to confirm priors or say, I need to go back and watch more film and just kind of flesh that out a little bit. So that's really the way I look at this these, what is this, 4 days of workouts. And obviously you look for different things with each group. But to me, it's just like football nerd 101, man. Go watch some guys work out, really get into the scouting kind of side of it. And it's interesting because now a lot of the teams that I have relationships with, a lot of the Sean McVay tree guys, they don't even go to the combine anymore. They watch it all on tape, which again is, I think, it's a good way to evaluate because you don't get any kind of bias towards people you've seen in person, but also you miss some of the stuff like in the drills, I think. So it's just different how people are handling it now. But to the original point, that's what I'm doing at the combine.
Right. And so a couple of things that are worth following up on there. One, as you said, early in the week, there's a lot of hobnobbing. There's a lot of the podium sessions obviously happen, and rarely do GMs actually say anything or coaches say anything worth anything in those situations. I'll also tell you that there will be not only the podium sessions for Dan and Adam, but there is a local scrum afterwards, and sometimes you get a little bit better stuff out of there because there's relationships and whatever. So we'll bring coverage of those. Like obviously, all the beat reporters will be writing about it, whatever. I can't, depending on what time that all goes down. There's one of them. My schedule is so upside down that I can't remember who's when. But Dan or Adam, I'm barely going to get there in time for on Tuesday, tomorrow, today for most of you listening. So hopefully I'll be able to actually be in there and ask a couple questions, but maybe get a little bit more there. But generally speaking, those are prepared on the record media stuff. There's going to be a lot of then the stories and rumors of, because all the agents are there, all the reporters are there, all the execs are there. And so you get all this stuff. You also get, I think, I don't call it misinformation. There is misinformation, right? There are some people that try to manipulate the media, and there are many media members that are primed for manipulation because they just want to be told something, and if it's juicy, they're going to run with it. But you also do genuinely get some really interesting scouting stuff too. Is you start to talk about with lower level scouts, their thing. And so that's why you'll see, I heard one team had a 7th round grade on this guy that everyone else has the 1st round. Yeah, not one team didn't, one scout did. That's a very different thing. And so you start to get those kinds of stories that emerge of the risers and the fallers even before the workouts begin, because some of the people that have been on the road and kind of inaccessible to a large part of the media, maybe some of the draft folks are in on that stuff and they've got those relationships and they follow the draft all year long. But the kind of team reporters that are more on the NFL schedule in many of the same ways that we are, some of that information starts getting exchanged as well. And I think that's definitely an interesting part of the combine experience.
Dude, 100%. I think that's the thing that's so frustrating about some of these stories that come out. Oh, so-and-so had, so for example, I'm doing receivers for my Ticket to the Draft show, which comes out, I don't know, sometime this week, Thursday, probably.
Again, Logan, days don't exist. It's combine week.
Whatever day it is, it's coming out. It'll be
subscribe,
on the
baby. Yeah. That's what you do it for.
And so I went through my receiver list, and I had a guy that probably isn't on anybody's list. He's in my top 5. I think he's in my top 6. And the other guy that I watched film with, he was like, why? And I was like, I'm going to explain it on the show. But this is the time of year where you get those really weird things. You get those weird outliers because it's one dude has made their big board. They're talking about it to another dude who doesn't really watch a lot of film. They haven't come together and had meetings yet. You know what I mean? It hasn't happened yet. It might be kind of laying the groundwork, but I can't tell you how many times I've talked to some of my NFL coaching buddies. They're at the combine. They're I haven't watched any film yet. I've watched zero film.
I remember having a conversation with a coach like that last year. I went to go ask him about a couple receivers because he was a receivers coach. And I was like, hey, what do you think about this guy? He's like, oh, I heard he's pretty good.
Yeah. You're like, what?
And I was like, what? He's like, that's your group. He's like, yeah, we got to because that's the thing is what's the next thing on the NFL calendar? NFL Combine. Okay, great. What's the actual next thing on the NFL calendar? Yeah. Free agency. Yes. That's where the attention is focused, which is also why this week is really important. Some of the trades and all that kind of stuff can come together at a coffee shop somewhere in Indianapolis. That's part of the week.
Yeah, I think that's true. When I talk to my agent, my old agent, he is a man about town during this period because it's I got to go talk to GMX about player X and really kind of work out a deal. And this is, they talk about legal tampering. This is to me, when all of that stuff starts, you know what I mean? It all starts right now. Everybody's talking to everyone. They're always going to a meeting because all the personnel people are in Indianapolis, at least for a couple of days. Right. So I think that's where it is. It's it's a cool event because everybody's there. It's a little bit more lock and key than the owners meeting, for example, but it's a good opportunity to kind of see everybody, get information out there. And I just think just be careful with stuff you're hearing nationally, coming out of this, because it's so we're so preliminary in terms of foundation. You haven't talked, like the scouts haven't talked to the GM yet. The GM hasn't talked to the coaches yet. And so they're still kind of completing that information circle. And again, they're going to get this all taken care of and they're going to do a bang out job. But I think people think this is like the thing, but to your point, it's not the thing. It's like kind of a weird anachronistic or asynchronous kind of thing, because the next thing is free agents. So like, when everyone's talking, it's like free agency stuff mostly. Some people talk about meetings. Some people say, "Oh, I watched a little film because I got a meeting with this guy today." But it's out of order a little bit in terms of the priority of the combine.
For sure. And it's really hard for guys like Adam, who are kind of doing both, right? Like if you're the general manager, that top scout, like you are, especially if you're a scouting type of general manager, right? It's one thing if you are a cap guy or just kind of a leader, more of a leader, organizational type of person. There's all these different archetypes of GM. But if you're someone who is really in that scouting world and you've now taken on a role that is much, much, much more than scouting, I think that becomes interesting to know where to put your time, even like which meetings do I want to attend, which scouts or which prospects do I want to interview. You have to lean on your scouts. You have to trust your scouts. And it's a little different, or a lot different for the Commanders this year compared to last year, because last year it's like Adam needs to meet the quarterbacks. Got it. Yeah. Cool. Not that nothing else matters, but nothing else matters nearly that much. This year, who knows what the pick is going to be at 29. So you have to have a really good plan. Luckily for Adam, he's got a lot of experience in his career being around teams that are picking late, with his, going back to New England, Denver, where he won rings, and obviously the success he had in San Francisco.
Well, I think that's the other thing that I think really gets kind of shown out during the combine as opposed to other events. You get your local scouts are there, you get your regional scouts are there, you get your like half your country scouts there. So like region is like they break the country up into quarters. They report to one dude who does half, and then those two dudes report to a guy who does the whole country, all of college scouting, right? So, and then that guy reports to Adam, and then they do the same thing on the pro side. So like there's a lot of people distilling a lot of information and kind of working it up the ladder to Adam. And again, this is a kind of an early data point for it. So it's really a fascinating process in terms of like data management, distilling information, getting insight into players, and really trying to cut down the board a little bit, like of guys that don't fit that Commanders tag, don't fit whatever. And we did get a question about like, on the mock draft podcast that we did about how we didn't talk about archetypes for players. I'll tell you this right now. Think more, it's going to be less like tangible stuff and more intangible stuff. So that's the other thing we didn't really talk about is like, I'm watching the drills, but maybe the most important thing that comes out of the combine is the medical stuff and the team meetings that they have, right? Because you get to really get a feel for the guys. So everyone talks about like the Senior Bowl is important, the combine's important, the 30-30 visits are important, right? Those are all important, right? But they're important because they let you understand the player a little bit better, right? They let you kind of see them in your building, that you get to kind of sit them in front of the GM. How do they handle tough questions? And that's why these events are so important. It's, again, the football stuff at the Senior Bowl is important. The testing at this event is important, but it's not the thing. The thing is getting to know the athletes in a way that on this side of the media, we can never know, because we don't have access. We don't have a team to kind of go through this information. And that's why I always find it so interesting when after the combine, you see guys like Brugler and Jeremiah and their board totally changes. It's not because they've watched more film. It's because they talked to all their scouting buddies and their scouting buddy was like, actually, this medical thing is way more concerning, or actually this incident in college was way more concerning than we thought. So we're going to bump guys down or taking them off our boards. And all of a sudden, if you get a team that's taking a bunch of guys, or a lot of teams that are taking one guy off their board, he's probably not going to go in the first round anymore. So like that's the kind of, those are the conversations that I think are so interesting. So, checking out those guys that are really locked in from a scouting perspective post combine is always a really good data point for how these meetings went at the combine for some of these athletes.
For sure. And I do believe that Dane's going to pop on the show, on the radio show at the very least. We'll see if the timing works, that we can get Logan on a screen before we are two ships basically passing in the night in Indianapolis. But you will hear from Dane Brugler on one of the platforms this week for sure. Again, we'll get Trevor Sikkema. Got stuff lined up with Charles Davis, our buddy, our pal. So it's going to be a really fun week of interviews. To me, like, just selfishly, part of the reason I go every year is like Radio Row is awesome every year. Like you get really great interviews, you get access to guys in person in a way that you just don't, and it's a really fun time. The last little, I'm just going to stick a nugget in at the end here before we get to the mailbag. I was out in Phoenix. The reason part of this is chaos is because I was out in Phoenix for a wedding this weekend, but I did pop in to see my friends at Exos, which is the premier, which I don't say to downplay any of the other tremendous facilities that do combine training. They just have more people that do it through Exos than anyone else, and they've been an industry leader for a long time. But I popped into their facility in Phoenix to see a friend and show my wife around because it's like a fitness Disneyland. Have you ever been to the Phoenix headquarters?
I have not, but
Exos?
I've seen like digital tours
insane.
of it. It's incredible. Yeah,
It's
like they
insane.
do some really cool stuff, and like from a nutrition standpoint and from like a recovery standpoint, in conjunction with all the field access, the weight room stuff they have. It's a pretty nice spot for sure.
It's good stuff, and they got. I mean, like I was able to see Lorenzo Alexander, our old friend, out there, and like he works with some people in that group. But just one name to watch that I will mostly keep. That was not a reporting visit, so I'm not gonna tell tales out of school. But I don't think that they'll mind saying that Max Hairston, the DB from Kentucky. Watch out for him in the 40. Don't be surprised. I would be surprised if that number starts with 4.4 or higher. It's going to be 4.3s. We might be looking at 4.2 for him.
Yeah, I mean, that's always a fun thing too that I really love about, like when you do go to those facilities and like you do a great job of keeping those relationships. When you hear Daniel Jeremiah on the broadcast or in a podcast leading up and he says, "Oh, I think this guy runs well," he calls the training facility. They give him the numbers that they've been running. And again, like it's tough because as you know, like when you're prepping for a race, there's a lot of other variables. These guys are up
for sure
all hours of the day, but like in training, like he might have run something really special. And so like when Daniel Jeremiah says, "Watch out," he's not saying that for his health. He's saying that because like he's talked to the people that are training this guy. So that's always cool too, like kind of getting that inside baseball.
Yeah, I don't know if he's going to push Worthy's record from last year, but like I think if he doesn't run at least a 4.35 or faster, he'll be very disappointed. I think if he doesn't run a 4.2 something, he'll probably be disappointed. But I'm sure they would probably be like 4.35 or faster the way he's running. So just watch out for that one. Just Hoffman told you so. All right, let's get to a couple mailbag questions, and we'll obviously have tons more from Indianapolis this week. Check that out. And if not, well, then there's some other interesting questions to happen in next time that we do a mailbag. So, there's that. Breaking WNBA news, I just want to mention real quick, and then JP Finlay is going to come through in a few minutes. Diana Taurasi has announced that she's going to retire. 20-year WNBA vet, one of the all-time greatest women's basketball players to ever play. She just announced her retirement, so that breaking news just coming through the wire. So that just went down for the Phoenix Mercury. Diana Taurasi retiring after 20 years in the WNBA. Of course, the Mystics made a huge trade this weekend. At some point, we'll find time to talk about that. Try to do some stuff on the Hoffman W Sports YouTube page on that front. Ariel Atkins going to the Chicago Sky for the number 3 pick. They now hold 3, 4, and 6 in the W draft, do the Mystics. But much more on the Commanders and everything else here at the Indianapolis Scouting Combine. Big story of the day, Jonathan Allen has requested a trade, and he has been granted permission to seek a trade. JP Finlay was one of the first people to report it. He will join us to discuss it coming up at 5:30 here on the Team 980.
It's time to take
It's the Hoffman Show, live from Indianapolis at the NFL Scouting Combines. Those words go together in some order. We're here on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app, and we are streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. JP Finlay going to join us here in about 5 minutes to discuss this bit of breaking news from earlier today. John Allen has been given permission to request a trade. Adam Peters was asked about it earlier today.
They're always these kind of decisions and things you have to come up with are always tough, right? And with John, who's been a great player as a commander, as a football teamer and a Redskin, he's been a great person for this franchise for a long time. So you have to weigh in everything, and we looked at internally and okay, what decision we want to make that we think is best for the team, but also you want to do what's best for that player. So those are tough conversations to have, but you always want to have them civilly, and we have, and his agent's been really good with us, and look forward to coming to a resolution.
So what is best for John? What is best for the team? That's what we need to parse out. Like, what actually does that look like for Allen? Where would he like to go? Are there any fits that already emerge? Obviously, I think most of you are listening or going, well, what's best for the team? Like, whatever. If you can send John to Timbuktu or Siberia and you get a better draft pick back, then sweet. But really, what is the best for the team? And how important is, something that Will Dawkins talks about all the time on the Wizards side of it is like, when we make these trades for like Kyle Kuzma, like we want to do right by these guys. Having a good reputation in the league matters. And this is the kind of event, by the way, where you see a lot of that stuff, be discussed, and how it is working with different agents, with different GMs, with different everything, as everyone's coming all together here in Indy. So JP Finley's got the latest reporting on all of that. So he and I will chop up what this pending divorce between the Commanders and Jonathan Allen means, and everything else from the day's news. Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard just announced they're going to have an open quarterback competition in Indianapolis. Maybe that winds up coming up. So plenty happening, plenty going on. We're going to talk about it with JP Finlay next here on the Team 980. the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube, too, at the Team 980, where you just saw JP Finlay kind of do the, the Chris Collinsworth slide?
That was not even close to a Collinsworth.
You want to try it again?
Give you one?
You want to try to give it? Here we go.
No, it's in a chair, which is a little more difficult.
Yeah, and there we are. A little too close. Didn't stick the landing.
No.
I'm comfortable. Just like you overshot the mark. You hit it too far past the pin.
You are so advanced. What is that? You have a graphic when you go to break?
Yeah, we got commercials on this show,
bro. My hat's off to you.
Thank you, everybody. If you do want good Commanders content, though, JP Finlay on YouTube, very, very good channel. Lots of stuff there.
Yeah, but it's like not produced. Yours is like well produced. Mine is just rugged raw.
You're doing great. If you want the raw video of Adam Peters talking to reporters today,
see, I think that's where you go. I think there's a market for that. That's why I always
there
post
is.
Stuff. Yeah.
There is. That's probably more of an off-air conversation that we can have about best YouTube practices, but maybe we'll do that at some point over a beverage here in Indianapolis.
Hoff, I have a unique path, dude.
Yeah.
In all facets.
If JP were to write an autobiography, one, that's not going to happen because JP would have to write a book. Two,
my wife wants me to.
Really?
Yeah, she very much wants me to.
Oh, interesting. I think a unique path would be a good potential title contender.
It would.
All right.
Or Zindiana.
That's this week for you. So, John Allen, the trade request comes in today. You confirmed the reports pretty quickly. Like, what's the impetus here, if there's anything beyond the obvious of his contract is up, and it makes a hell of a lot of financial sense for them to move on from him?
Bro, I think this is strictly just football business, and it's not good or bad. It's just this is how good teams operate. And I think when you look at even the Newton pick from last year, it's kind of setting yourself up to be able to do this. I think we will see it. One of these things where actions are what matter, right? I think we will see it, though, in action when they say we want to do right by John and we want to do right by us. If they can't get a trade, and from what I understand, you're talking about probably like a late-round pick swap, like John and a 6, and maybe you get a late 4, something like that. And maybe it's even less than that. Maybe it's John and a 6 for a 5 or something. I don't know. But that NFL trade market's so unique and so hard to figure out.
You're not getting a lot in return. People are like, "Hey, trade it for Myles Garrett."
Right.
Like that's not how.
I love the Allen
go.
and a 1 for Garrett. Like that's not going to work. But I think it's highly possible they don't get a trade done, and then the right thing to do for John is to release him so that he is available when free agency opens, when the market opens. And I think we've seen in the past at various times they haven't always really treated their guys in that manner, and I think this will be the first opportunity for Peters and DQ and this group to show they do.
Do you think that matters in this league? I know something on the Wizards side that like Dawkins talks about all the time is like we want to do right by our guys because we think our reputation in the league matters. It's something they clearly care about in that league. In this league that is notoriously harsh in the way it does business, do you think that matters?
I think the NBA, there's so much money floating around and everything's guaranteed that the reputation absolutely matters. In the NFL, where money's hard to get and none of it's guaranteed, money, like it's similar to the conversation like, oh, free agents are going to want to come play with Jaden. That's great. 98% of those decisions are based on money.
Right.
Like, so maybe that 1 or 2%
they will this year because
they
might have $100 million in cap space.
Right. I mean, but I do think it matters to do things the right way because I think a big part of it, and I think they're not going to tell us a word about it till there's an Instagram post showing the new contract. But like, I think the McLaurin deal will be indicative of it too. These dudes talk about brotherhood and culture, and part of that, and the Niners do this well. Not to say there aren't contentious negotiations. The Niners take care of their guys when it comes time, right? That's a big part of brotherhood and culture. Like, you want your leaders to buy in the locker room, cool, but you got to pay them when it's time. And I think their locker rooms are full of lots of different people. You've worked the NFL locker rooms just like me, right? One thing, every single person in there, 53 on the active, now you got 65 in there. They all know how much money the other guy's making. They know what their guarantees are. They know what their bonus structures are. And if one of your leaders is coming up, you either pay them or you give them an opportunity to go, and you do it the right way. With guys in professional football understand the cutthroat nature of this business, but there's still a right and a wrong way to do it.
100%. That's really well said, because I do think that's something that is true on both fronts, right? Guys both get it, that there is a business element to this that is totally undeniable, that eventually will come for them. And they hope that it comes for them on their third contract when it's just like, well, at least I stacked whatever millions, not on like, oh, I was the rookie last year that got a shot and now I didn't even make the team. But there's going to be a harshness to the business because of the numbers game eventually. But also there's like an accepted, it's almost like the rules of war, like the rules of engagement type of thing. Where like, yeah, but at least, okay, they went about it the right way. And I was talking to a former player over the weekend about like he had gotten released here. Funny story, I'll tell you off air, by the way, of running into this player in a very random place. But he had been released from here, and like the way they went about it, he was pissed about.
Well, I don't want to guess who the player is, but a pretty common known story is how they handled Morgan Moses a couple of years ago.
Wasn't Morgan, but
okay.
yeah.
But like, there's a right way and a wrong way, and some of that wasn't anybody's fault. It was they liked Leno. Leno got released out because there's kind of another rung of free agency after the draft where some veterans do get released because of guys they drafted, whatever.
Right. You want a contingency plan going into the draft. You actually get the guy that you didn't think you were going to get. Now all of a sudden you got a surplus.
So there's lots of routes, right? But the best way to handle it is to let a guy be free when the true free agency market opens.
So on Allen with that front, to go back to kind of the impetus for this, and JP Finley's with us here on the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. Like, I actually think the best thing for the team is also to just let him go as soon as you know that you're not going to have a trade. Am I misreading that math, or is that how that all adds up? Because that gives them more. The second they let him go, they get the cap space. Yeah. So they would have more cap space going into free agency.
I don't think you're in a hurry to do it by the end of this week.
Right.
But I think you get to March 8th-ish. You know what I mean? Like, you'll have kicked every tire. People will call you. I think there's going to be some interest in Allen, specifically from, like, if you look at a pair of NFC North teams in the Vikings and the Lions, and teams that feel like they're on the doorstep there. And John's still a good player, especially if you can get him in, like, a situational thing, and the asking price isn't too high. But, I don't think you want this to linger, but you got a little bit of time. But, dude, this is not a surprise to anyone. I don't even think to informed fans this is a surprise.
No. I mean, I think we've all known. Maybe it's like, oh, they didn't realize the trade was an option. But, like, I think if you ask most people that pay attention, was John Allen going to be a Commander in 2025, like as in the 2025 league year / season? The answer is no, because there's no reason for him to be.
Unless perhaps there was a lane where he wanted to be here so bad, and he told AP or DQ, hey, I really just want to finish my career here at home, that like I could take a below market rate. But I don't think he should do that, and I don't think he would.
And I also
that to me would have been the only path.
So here's the other uncomfortable part of this. I don't know that he fit with them from multiple things. Like, they schematically did things differently.
Agreed with that.
From when he was in the game versus when he was not. Like the stretch he was into the start to then he goes out. And the stuff that they did when he went out seems a lot more similar to the way that Dan's defense has played in Dallas and everywhere else he's been that's been really good. And I draw the conclusion that perhaps there was some disagreement there, and I don't know how much room, like, in a way that I
but
appreciate.
a lot shifted.
There's like
over
I don't
the
know
course of the season after the injury too.
For sure. Yeah. Like I don't know. Like, if you're trying to get the new leadership and the new everything, like Terry is so bought in and so clearly like at the forefront of what they're doing. I don't know that John's that in the same way in terms of the transition and the way they go about their business. I'm not saying, like, obviously for Washington now, DQ's way is right because he's the one guiding it, and Adam is right there with him in lockstep. I'm not saying that the way that John thinks about football or whatever doesn't or can't work. I don't think it's the same thing.
It's interesting. I don't know. I think the injury probably impacted that, whereas for me, at best, you could say an incomplete decision on that.
Yeah.
Like, he was just removed and rehabbing for so long. And I think, like, the argument about stadiums is like, well, if you put that money towards something else, there'll be development too, right? Like, if Allen was still on the field, might that defense have changed also?
Maybe.
Like schematically, because and when you saw him come back, I thought he was good in the 2 playoff games. I thought he was really bad the first game back.
Definitely the best 2 games that he played all year.
And then didn't they? I'd have to go back, but didn't they kind of like start trying to use him to set an edge in some of the run? I think that was more of a problem with who they had to set edges in the run. I don't think that's ideal for John, but like that to me shows a level of buy-in. Like, yeah, dude, I'll do that.
But at some point, right, like,
But if your argument is simply, I'm not sure he's a fit going forward, I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they
drafted
Newton for that reason. Similar
money.
Well, and then you get to the financial side. And the financial side is just a no-brainer. Like, it would, unless John was playing at a Pro Bowl caliber level, paying him what he is due would be pretty recklessly irresponsible, which is, by the way, how every NFL deal is basically done. Right. Because at the end of it, you want to either be able to be like, we have a bargain, like, especially if you give a guy a ton guaranteed up front. I know you know this, but for the audience listening, like, if you give a guy a bunch of money up front, the change or the exchange, the way that gets balanced for it to be fair for the player, to get the money up front for the team is like, well, we get control on the back end. And if you've played your tail off, you're probably going to want a new deal, and that's our decision, or we can just move on. And I think it makes sense with where John is and what he's done to move on. The other big Commanders adjacent story today is that Andrew Berry, the general manager of the Cleveland Browns, is very insistent they are not trading Myles Garrett. And I had Andrew Siciliano sitting where you are about an hour ago, and he is like, that's for real. Like, they are not trading. Now, we'll see if there's a holdout situation, whatever, if it gets ugly in July. But, like, I think on the Browns side, they are very much of the mindset that if we just give him the biggest guaranteed deal in the history of the NFL for a defensive player, he'll sign it, and hopefully he'll retire a Cleveland Brown. If you are then the Commanders going into this offseason, and Adam had the fun exchange with 48 today about, what big trade could you be talking about? Like, how do you try to build a team when you know getting the best defensive player in football could still potentially be out there? Because that now seems like it's their task. If Garrett's traded, it's not going to be happening anytime soon.
I think today, Tuesday, Garrett is not available. I think Garrett doesn't seem to be the dude to start causing a bunch of trouble, but, like,
no,
Garrett could become available. I think as we get to the draft, Garrett could become available. I feel like if it gets past the draft, he sticks around because they give him just some ungodly amount of money. And they could show Garrett, and this is what all the Browns people I've talked to are saying, that, hey, we're going to sign a veteran. Like, we're going to try to get some stability at the quarterback
position.
Right,
they think they're close.
Great. I'm not willing to rule out Garrett, but I also think if it's not Garrett, doesn't mean that there aren't moves to be made. Max Crosby, and the Raiders keep saying the same stuff. He has 2 years left on his deal without a single guaranteed dollar.
He ain't showing up.
Would you?
No. And the thing is, like, the way the CBA is, you get fined to hell if you actually legitimately hold out.
But who did it last year? They still wiped it, even though they're not supposed to. Right.
That's the thing. It's like you go to camp. Yeah, you go to camp. You wear T-shirt and shorts.
Jamar did last coach
Cincinnati.
Had to send him away.
Yeah.
Right. So you could cause enough trouble. You know, like, I don't know that Garrett's that dude, and I think if the money – if playing in Cleveland really bothered you, would it only really start to bother you this year when you don't have guarantees on your deal? Because I think you would have been bothered for a while now.
I wonder if he has been bothered for a while and was a good soldier, because I don't think he wants to leave.
He's making a lot of money.
I think for sure.
Yeah.
But, like, he was also having a ton of success. And, you know, like, Siciliano made this point, which I had forgotten about because it's easy to forget because of how much of a disaster the Browns were this year, but also felt like in previous years because of the Watson stuff. They were in the playoffs 2 years ago. Yeah, so, like, what was he going to do? Come off a playoff year with Flacco and be like, hey, actually, I want out of here? Like, probably not. Yeah. Like, he does, like, there is a sense of loyalty, which, by the way, when, you know, fans ask about, does he fit in Washington? Like, yeah, he's a great dude. Like, the reviews on Myles as a guy are like A++++. And the fact that he's tolerated this many years in Cleveland, like, actually speaks well to his character. And now I think you just kind of get to a breaking point where you're like, I'm good.
See, it's funny. So Tischler and I just did this on the podcast. What is your percentage chance Garrett gets traded today?
I'd probably say like 40.
Okay, so I was at 50. Mitch was at 75. Like, he's just like, I think it's still happening. I think at best it's a coin flip, and I think I think the Barry and crew have to be so steadfast because they don't want to even entertain it, because the second you're like, you know, we've got to consider, then it's done.
Right.
Like as soon as I remember,
that toothpaste is out of the tube.
Dude, I remember when the then Redskins sent out the first press release. It's like, we're going to review the impact of our team name. As soon as you review the impact, you're allowing that there is an impact, and it's over.
Bank of America, October 2022.
Yeah, exactly.
We're exploring the possibility of a sale. Right. But then again, the learners put the toothpaste back in the tube. So,
they are a unique bunch.
Yeah, that is, to say the least. JP Finlay with us here on the Hoffman Show. Anything else from any of the press conferences? I mean, there's stuff that's interesting. Obviously, I don't know if you saw that. I think you were over there, actually. Ballard and Steichen apparently said they're going to have an open quarterback competition in Indianapolis. Like, there's interesting NFL stuff. Is there anything else that was said?
Trying to hold on to your job.
Yeah, of course it is. Of course it is. Anything
did you hear? I posted a clip of Pete Carroll. Mitch and I were standing there for Pete Carroll, and we were like, we should ask him about Bobby Wagner. And he's like, yeah, I was really happy for Bobby and Dan this year. Really cool year. Bobby's bombed with that quarterback. I think he said something like irreplaceable. And then at the end, almost with like a smirk, he's like, man, he's a free agent. Talking about Bobby.
Yeah.
That is
sent shivers up your spine.
It's something to watch.
Yeah. It's a West Coast guy.
Yeah. I think, I think it's always interesting listening to the other coaches. Howie Roseman had a line that stood out to me, especially as Washington has to try to chase Philly in their own division, and how he said, I have an unhealthy obsession with offensive and defensive linemen. And, like, if you watch that team, that's where they just absolutely kick your butt. So
they're real good at finding them.
Yeah, I think it's a kind of a guidepost for Washington.
On the Bobby thing made me think of this. Like, obviously, they have, 28 of their own free agents that
big number.
Are out there, and Adam seems to want to re-sign a fair amount of them, which when you go to the NFC Championship game, that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Any in particular that you think are, like, who are if you had to rank the top 3 guys priority-wise for them, not for you, for them, who do you think those 3 guys are?
I think Chin's got to be near the top. I think if you consider the snap count, I mean, that dude played damn near every snap unless he came off the field for an injury. And that he's younger. It's easy to say Wagner there, but Wagner is older. Chin, I think he's 27.
Yeah.
I'd have to pull it up. I don't have my computer, but I think Chin, you try to get a 3-year deal.
Yeah.
And you kind of do what they did with Biotish or Armstrong, where there's a little bit of guaranteed money into a second year, so you're probably able to keep those guys around. I think Chin's at the top of the list. I think Wagner, Ertz.
And I think that's the interesting thing. I don't have a bunch of guys. Like, there's a bunch of guys that I would love to bring back if the price is right. Your Diamis, on down the list. Like, OZ, I think, is an interesting one. Like, there's plenty of those guys. But, like, you get to Wagner and Ertz, the mid-30s guys, pretty quick. And I would pay them, market value is, I guess, a funny term, because I think what fans think market value for those guys is versus what their actual markets might be versus what their agents might want might be 3 totally different numbers.
Totally.
But, like, I would bring those 2 back in a heartbeat, and I would pay more than I paid last year to have them.
I think you'll have to.
Yes.
I mean, that's what the cost of eggs is.
Yeah.
But I think one thing I found really interesting that I tried to ask AP was like, hey, how important is it to get some of these in-house guys done?
Yeah.
And he's like, well, some of them want to see what the market is. I think Ertz, in his closing comments at locker cleanout, was super clear about wanting to come back.
Correct.
And I wonder if you can get Ertz done before, because he's got a perfect situation. He's got Cliff. He's
got the coach he wants to play. The only coach he wants to play for, and the guy that he said, and this is a guy that might go to the Hall of Fame. And he said, I'd do my whole career over, basically, if I could play with that dude every year.
And he talked throughout the season about how well DQ took care of him. He never practiced on a Wednesday, just let him take care of his body. So I think Ertz you could get done. Wagner, dude, we had Joel Corey on last week, I think, on our show. And at some point, people got to stop being slaves to the age thing and just look at the production.
Dude was a second-team All-Pro.
Right. Like, if I'm Bobby Wagner, unless that number is very correct, I might wait. Especially, I know Pete Carroll's.
Do you have a number in mind for what that is?
So Corey said 10 mil.
But the thing is, like,
Carroll's in Vegas. Like,
yeah,
he will have options.
Yeah, they got money,
but every year he's been available, and there's just this really slow train for him. So
for sure,
maybe
I think the other thing
I don't know.
I think the other thing to remember is the cash number and the cap number are 2 very different numbers.
Yeah, Peter's talked about that.
And so, like, if you want to get, I've been using this example, like, if Zach is like, my number's $12 million, and it's a 1 year, $12 million. You can put a void year and make $8 million of that a signing bonus. Now your cap number for this year for him is only $8 million. You push 4 of it into next year. So like, there's things you can do cap gymnastics wise, or you just do it this year because you're gonna have $100 million after you waive John Allen or trade John Allen. Last thing, I'm asking everybody who sits in this chair this. It hits a little different for you because you also cover the team. But my question for everybody that I'm asking is there something you learned about the NFL or team building from watching what Washington did this year that either like really clarified something for you, or that it was just like, nope, I learned that in 2025 watching this group work?
I mean, to quote Ron Rivera, quarterback.
That's mean, and I like it.
Dude, you get a quarterback, it changes everything. And that's not to say that a lot of other great things didn't happen. And if you care about the emotional, spiritual side of this, they created a real bond in that locker room, and it was special to watch. And I think that carries over in a lot of these close games and everything. And I think they have a pretty good rookie class from last year. And there's a lot of exciting things, but Jaden. Yeah, Jaden is my final answer.
Yeah, he solves a lot, fishes a lot, make sure everything, all the culture stuff comes alive to its maximal ability.
Dude, it's easy to buy in when you've got the best player on the field.
That's true. And how many times did you ask guys in that locker room, hey, why'd you win today, basically? And the answer was 5.
Yeah, dude.
And the fact that they know it's pretty funny.
Remember when Tress shouldn't give his number up was a thing?
Yeah.
I love Tress. He's a dear friend of mine. There's a reason. There's a reason for all of it.
By the way, the story with his wife looking at him being like, why do you have the C on your chest? Like, that's good stuff right there.
That's the good stuff.
So what's Tress's wife's name?
Bree.
Yeah. The real captain
of the
Commanders. Shout out to Bree. All right, that's JP Finlay. You can hear him tomorrow at the table that's right there. But you'll hear it on the radio on 106.7. The Fan also, they stream live on YouTube over on their page as well.
We don't have commercials, though.
Yeah, well, you do have commercials. You just don't have a graphic that I'm about to play here on the stream. All right, I'm going to hit that graphic now, and then I have no idea what we're doing next, but more from the Indianapolis Scouting Combine.
Real things people said into real microphones.
That's in an hour. Thanks for listening. Let's go. Hour number 3 from Indianapolis. It's the NFL Scouting Combine, the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube, where you see Mitch Tischler, who decided you almost did a Collinsworth slide.
I was going to Collinsworth slide, but then I decided I wanted to do the air horns with the cat. Meow, 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 meow.
Yeah.
And
there you go.
That's more.
But I know you don't have headphones on right now, but Anthony just hit him again with the meow, 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 and really perfect. Anthony, that was well done out of you, sir.
He's a spectacular producer.
He is. Yeah,
he might be a little shady at Madden, but he's a great producer.
Oh my gosh!
Oh my gosh, he says. I refuse to sit here and play middleman between the two of you for the next 20 minutes. So I'm gonna go in like somewhat reverse order of what I just did with JP. Of course, you can catch JP and Mitch on the Beltway Football Podcast. How many tables does JP have here? He's got just the 2, and then I brought him over here.
Listen, we have the Audacity table here.
That is a bit. Hold on, can you hand me that sign?
I mean, listen, this is funny in that it's just miserably wrong.
That should say Odyssey DC. It says Audacity.
How about NBC4 is NBC Commanders in DC?
We got signs all over the place that are not making a lot of sense. I will say the one thing that I do appreciate.
All the signs they got right. Monumental Sports is the only one that seems to
Monumental,
be the correct one.
It's some damn Leonsis just made a call over there.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I do appreciate that I'm sign number 44 though, because there's inevitably a million Syracuse alums in this room, and 44 is a sacred number in Syracuse lore, and I'm the one who got the table.
44 is a sacred number in Commanders lore.
Yes, it
33
also is. Yes,
as well, which is our monumental table. So we're representing well here.
We are. Retire our numbers. / they already
Please.
are.
Yeah.
That's how that goes down. So I'm going to start in somewhat reverse order of what I did with JP, which I'm going to ask you the question that I'm asking everyone first. And as I said with JP, it hits a little different for you because like we've been on this journey the entire time through this season with this team. But I think because of just how much changed with Washington this year and the way they went about their business, how public they were in terms of the things they were looking for, all the different ways that the organization changed. Like, is there something that you take away from this season that you either learned about team building / the NFL or that was clarified for you in a major way?
Yeah, I would say how quickly you can turn a team around, honestly, is number one. And we all know how important quarterback is, and all the Jaden Daniels talk is obviously well worth it. More so, how a front office can come together and put together a essentially brand new team, 33 new players with the initial 53 last year. I imagine this year it's going to be semi-similar in terms of how many new faces are going to be in Washington.
Yeah, it's going to be a ton.
And how well, if you're able to scout and bring in the right types of players, you can have veteran players who are quote-unquote over the hill, which we heard a lot preseason about with a bunch of different of the Commanders players, but how they can all fit together and give you a product like we saw on the field this year, because for far too long we saw Washington bring in, veteran free agents and they never hit. And all of a sudden you get Adam Peters, Dan Quinn, and you don't miss.
Right. Hilariously, by the way, I ran into Josh Norman outside the building today. So Josh
No
is
comment.
here doing something.
I didn't say Josh Norman's name.
No, he's an example of a guy that was incredible in Carolina, should have in his prime in terms of what should have been. And I mean, the corner position is volatile as hell. But I do think that one of the things that is interesting, having covered Josh and many others, is like my big takeaway is that, it's more of a clarifying point that I've said a bunch of times before over the years covering this league and covering football in general. But like the way that it came to life this year was wild, which is you are better off having 11 going in the same direction to an inferior plan than the best plan ever or the most talent and people not all working together. And so like that happens on the field in very obvious ways where you have a receiver run the wrong route and messes up this, we had the perfect play dialed up, but whatever happened. Or one guy plays, doesn't get a check in coverage. Yeah. But like to see that on an organizational level where everybody in that building from owner to GM, entire front office, coaching staff.
You skipped over 16 other owners.
16 minority partners. Like everyone was on the same page. And the buy-in creates the best version of everyone, and that overcomes the talent deficit in a way that, like, I didn't even know was possible.
Well, I also think you brought up Josh Norman, and to kind of further that point, it's not necessarily bringing in the most talented individual. It's the most talented individual that fits what you're trying to do.
Right.
And you look at some of the veterans they brought in, aren't guys that are off the charts at RAS or, never, blew the doors off anybody in terms of, being, Bobby Wagner aside, Hall of Fame, whatever. But you bring in a bunch of guys who are all, rowing the ship in the same direction, and you're able to get production on the field. And you can look up north to Philly with Zach Bond, who was a castaway from New Orleans, and how well he fits in Philly and what they did.
They didn't even know that was going to happen, though.
So I was talking to one of the guys, not somebody with the team, but somebody very close to the team, and they were saying that as they were going through the tape, Fangio specifically pointed out Bond and was like, I don't know if what I'm seeing on the special teams tape is necessarily going to transfer, but if it does, this kid could be special, and obviously it turned out well. But bigger point being, it's not going out and getting the biggest name. It's not going out and getting the single most talented player who's the most athletic, strongest, fastest, whatever. It's about finding guys that fit your system and getting everyone to play together.
Yeah, ultimately, you have a job on the field and a job in the building, and everybody embracing their job to the best of their actual abilities will, in a stunning turn of events, unlock the maximum of their abilities.
But like Josh Norman, he brought up, was great in Carolina.
Great in Carolina.
But you bring him in to play a defense that doesn't necessarily fit what he does well is a perfect example of A, why you need a real GM,
yes.
B, why you need a real head coach, C, why you need a real owner, and D, why everything is different right now.
Yes, absolutely true. I also, it was funny as I was setting up this question for some other folks, it was also clarified that owner, head coach, GM, quarterback. Tirico came on the show in the middle of the year. It was those are the four things that matter. Yeah. And they literally in the last 18 months have a new of all of them, and they're one of the best five maybe in the entire. I mean, I don't know if DQ is considered a top 5 head coach, but for what he does,
it's hard to argue what he did this season.
CEO style, absolutely, he's one of the best. He's an A version of that archetype of head coach. If you like your Shanahan, McVay, O'Connell type better, then fine, that's your personal opinion. But Dan did enough to build the staff around him and make everything work for him. Okay, the news of the day is obviously the John Allen situation. It's not surprising, but it also is one of those things when it hits you, it's oh, well, we're really here. Okay, this is when this is going to go down. What do you make of it and what Adam Peters had to say about it?
I think what Adam said was the right thing to say. I mean, you don't want to, obviously, you want to prop the guy up because you're still trying to trade him and get some assets for him. The reality of it is he doesn't have a huge trade market. There's not going to be a ton of return. The talk about him being traded correlating to anything Myles Garrity, I think is a step too far.
I think that's correct. I will say, if there's a Deebo Samuel type of trade, something where another team is in the same position and it helps the math, that could be something where it's a big name trade, but it actually is multiple ancillary pieces that if they work well in their new places could be great. But guys that are going to be cut anyway, and they just trade them for each other.
Exactly, and that's if you're talking about that in a Deebo world, you're talking about John and a mid-round pick for Deebo, or mid to late round pick for Deebo or something like that. But big picture with John Allen, he meant a lot to this organization when the organization had nothing to rely on. And for that, you have to tip your cap to him.
For sure.
He stepped up into a leadership role that isn't in his personality. He's not the type of guy that wants to stand up in front of a room and preach to guys, but he recognized there was a void, and he filled it. Now, was he the right person to fill it? There are questions to be answered there.
For sure.
But ultimately, he was a very important part of a very bad organization. Unfortunately, he got paid, didn't perform to the pay. You see what the vision was with Daron Payne, John Allen, if you want to talk about all 4 first-round picks. It's what Philly did this year in the Super Bowl and all season long. Ultimately, I think John Allen is more of a playmaker at defensive tackle, and I think that this defensive staff wants defensive tackles that are more eating up blocks and allowing room and lanes for linebackers to flow freely and get to it. And so ultimately, I don't know that John, either personality-wise or play on the field-wise, was a perfect fit with this Dan Quinn group. However, he gets a lot of credit for the first, 7 years of his career.
For sure. And did he do enough in those 7 years to get his number retired or go in the Ring of Honor? No.
I'm sorry.
No.
I didn't mean to jump on that so hard, but...
Mitch has strong thoughts on that. I agree with him. I was doing a rhetorical bit there.
fans propped him up for a long time.
For sure.
Because he was one of the only things that you could look at.
If you had asked me 2 years into his career, is this guy on that path, I would have said, there's a chance.
There's a chance.
Like, he's really, really good, and he's probably going to be a leader. But
he was the yodeler going up the mountain in the Price is Right game.
Yeah.
He just reached the cliff and fell off the other end.
Goodbye. But, like, should he be cheered if he comes back for alumni events? Like, yes. That was the second half of my rhetorical question.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to it was an involuntary response to that.
Mitchell's opinion is on the record on that one. But, like, that's the thing, right? Is, like, it ran its course. I agree with you that both on the field and off, I don't know that he's a fit with this group. But everyone got along well enough this year. And I think they're handling this the way that NFL business gets done, which is like, hey, if you can go find something, like, we're happy to facilitate. It's going to have to work from us. And, we're having this conversation with JP, obviously, but, like, sometimes you see wacky stuff then happen in terms of the timing of the release or whatever. Like, the best thing for Washington and the best thing for John in this particular case is they try to find a trade for the next week and a half. If it doesn't happen, they let him go. And that's the end of the John Allen era.
Yeah. I don't know what's going to happen with it. We'll see. But this might be not the next week and a half. I think this might lead up to the drafts because, deadlines.
You think it could?
I don't think it will, but I could see
because I could see them wanting the cap space. Like, it's $16 million in space.
It is, which is a lot, but that $16 million is how much you're going to spend on your rookie class, and you don't have to worry about spending that money until after the draft. So you can ostensibly hold on to them for an extra month or so if you think that sort of deadline is going to spur a deal. But ultimately, let's be honest, there's not going to be a massive market for him. Maybe there's a deal for him. Ultimately, you mentioned the Ring of Honor thing. This team was so obsessed with the all decades teams or whatever that the last time they put it out, there were a bunch of players who were real bit players on it. We have to recognize that the 15, 20 years of bad football doesn't mean that we need to overly boost the status of players who played in that era because they were average to good players because there were so few of them.
That's 100% true. And I think the funny thing is like now the one guy left from that fearsome foursome, fearsome in the dreams of the people that drafted them.
You get rhetorical there.
Thank you. I need some space to breathe, Mitchell.
I'm sorry.
Need some space to breathe. The one guy left is now Daron Payne, who I think is probably the most misunderstood. And maybe Montez was in a way who he was as a player. The edge setting and all those kinds of things were underappreciated in a way. But by the same token, like Daron has actually been incredibly consistent over his career. Just 1 year, the pressure rate turned into 11 sacks, and that happened to be the year he was about to get paid, and so they had to pay him. But like from a pressure standpoint, who he's been, the types of plays he makes, the hot streaks, like Daron's been consistent, and he's now going to be in this position. Like if we're sitting here a year from now, we're probably having the same conversation about Daron Payne.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, Daron has an opportunity to go out and
he's basically in a contract year again. So
it's a similar situation, but big picture, what I liked about all this was the team Adam Peters recognized where they were with these guys. 2 years in a row, you're going to have two major deals that you're going to have to figure out. They went out and brought in Johnny Newton, or drafted Johnny Newton. He had his injuries during the offseason. I like that they kept it together. They gave Johnny a year to kind of, get involved. I imagine as we go through this draft, I'm not saying that they're going to be a first-round defensive tackle or even a second-round defensive tackle, but I think there's going to be a top 100 there's going to be a top 100 defensive lineman taken, and I would like to see them go sort of that same route where you kind of ease them in. They did it with Brandon Coleman at left tackle. They did it with Johnny Newton they did it with as much as they could with Mikey Sainers still at corner. I liked it the way that they brought in these rookies, and they didn't throw them to the wolves.
Right.
They kind of worked them into a system, let them get comfortable, and also this team is, for the first time in forever, looking ahead. They're seeing, hey, these are the obstacles we're going to have in 2026, 27, 28, 29, and they can use the draft to start working on filling those holes. Not you're going to get a starter every time, but you're building depth at positions that are going to have turnover coming up. That's a big deal.
Mitch Tischler, Beltway Football Podcast, with us here on the Hoffman Show. The funny thing there's a million funny things about the Combine. This is an absolutely, objectively, the more I come to it, hilarious event. Because there's the media side of it and like all the information exchanges. Then like theoretically there's, the draft part of it. But then, like, the actual next thing on the NFL calendar, and a lot of stuff that happens here is between agents and teams for free agency. So knowing that Washington is going to have currently $80+ million in cap space, let's count another Allen, 16. You could have another 10 from Andrew Wiley if you wanted to. They don't have, like, oh, we can spend big on whatever type of money, like multiple pieces, because they have so many guys they have to bring back or fill those holes. So it's not like, you know, per empty roster spot, they don't have the most cap space or the second most cap space in the league. But they still are pretty high on the list. So if you look at the free agent class, is there anywhere where you're like, I think they should spend there, either on a particular player that you've got circled for them that's not necessarily bargain bin guy, or a certain position?
I mean, I'm going to steal the Howie Roseman line. I'm sure JP brought it up earlier, but he's uncomfortably obsessed with offensive and defensive lines.
That Mitch Tischler, we talked about, I'm trying to remember, I think JP's autobiography title was A Unique Path. I am uncomfortably obsessed with offensive and defensive linemen.
That's me.
Mitch Tischler, that's your book.
Yeah, you just watch an Eagles offensive and defensive line dominate through the season, but particularly through the playoffs, and their GM is sitting there talking about needing to bolster that.
Yeah.
The same thing has to be in Washington. I like Brandon Coleman. I think, early on, I think they did a good job of working him in, had a solid middle season. End of the year, I think rookie wall / injuries. I want to give him another chance next year. I'm actually going to bring back I'm bringing back Andrew Wiley.
I'm not mad at that.
To be your kind of backup swing tackle, but also your right guard until Sam Cosmi comes back. To me, the big place I want to see them address is right tackle in free agency. I'm not saying that you want to go out and get a $20 million a year guy, but I think that's where you need to try and upgrade on the offensive line. And you mentioned the Montez Sweat not being misunderstood for not being able to set an edge, or for setting edge as well.
Yeah.
I would hope Washington fans watch this season and what happened at the defensive end position and recognize that I'd rather have Montez Sweat get 6 sacks and set an edge and keep, these big run plays from happening, as opposed to Dante Fowler getting 10.5 sacks. I'd like to bring back Dante Fowler if it's a passing down situation role, not as a 3-down guy. To me, free agency I'm spending money offensive and defensive lines, and then working on depth in the draft. And to me, skill position players come from the draft. I'm not in the business of giving up big time dollars to a T. Higgins type or to another playmaker on the offensive side.
I think that's the funny thing in terms of the receiver position, because they're going to have to sign receivers in free agency because they only have Luke and Terry basically on the roster. Yeah, I'm sure like the Bryson Tremaines of the world are floating around being like, hey, give me a shot. Yeah, I mean, look, Bryson, I thought played okay for Bryson Tremaine. So that's Bryson's book so far. The rest, as was once said in the song, is still unwritten. But the receiver market is so expensive, and the guy I now feel like I'm picking on Darnell Mooney, but like Darnell Mooney made $13 million. That's the same that Saquon Barkley made last year. So like when people say, "Oh, you bring Diami back cheap," I'm like, I don't think Diami Brown's going to be cheap.
Diami's not coming cheap.
And so like, is there a guy that you can get? Like, if you can tell me that I can get Darius Slayton for $8 million, I would definitely consider that. But I think by and large, like going receiver in the draft, going line, making sure that Jaden has like a floor in front of him.
Yeah.
I feel like that's right. And then, like one of the guys that I'm really interested to see if they pursue is Khalil Mack, because you're playing with fire because of his age. They played with fire last year with guys with age, and it worked out in their favor. But and I don't know how much he's going to cost, but it's probably not. It's not going to be $20 million a year, I don't think.
No.
But he's like a guy that earlier in his career, tremendous pass rusher, but still is as good of an edge setter as there is in the league. Like, I mean that legitimately. Like, he's awesome at that. So I do wonder if like he's a guy that they see as a potential fit here, and do you give him $10 million and is that, one of your, I don't know that's their biggest expense, a $10 million player. I think there's probably someone who gets more than that. But is that one of your splashier signings?
Yeah, I wouldn't hate that. Listen, Frankie Louvu did a really good job when asked to play defensive end. The more that they can get in legitimate defensive ends and let Frankie
I think Frankie's
flow.
Better as like Logan and I have talked about this a good
Blitzing.
bit. I think blitzer, yes. Rusher really didn't have that great of a season.
That's exactly where I am. I think it was out of necessity that they put him there because they just didn't have enough real good end bodies that could get to a quarterback.
And I think they wanted to see if he could do the Micah thing. And, like, he could do some of it, but Micah's Micah.
But there's also something we learned from Dorrance Armstrong, who had 8.5 sacks 2 seasons ago in Dallas as a pass rush specialist. And there was the hope that he was going to be able to take that role and expand it to be a 3-down defensive end and hopefully expand those sack numbers. It's easy to get lost in the sauce and forget that, like, when you come in as a pass rush specialist, you're coming in, hand in the dirt, knowing where the quarterback is going to be, and it's different to get a 3-down guy. And Khalil Mack is a guy who, if he's able to stay healthy, can do that. On the offensive side of the ball, you brought up Debo, and is there a deal potentially there for him, which certainly is. And I like the thought of Debo Samuel taking those wide receiver screens or quick pop passes, as opposed to it being a De'Ami Brown type, because I think he can do more with it.
For sure.
But do I want to, if I have a 4th-round pick, do I want to go big game hunting for a Puka Nacua type who was a 5th-round pick a couple seasons ago?
Right.
Adam Peters has done a really good job drafting receivers. They clearly evaluate that position particularly well.
And they have plans for those guys. I think that's the thing is, like, there's a great clip of the Rams discussion before drafting Puka that I'm sure you've seen on they put out.
As they should.
Hey, Sean, Les, we got this clip of you guys talking about Nacua. Yeah, whatever we said, go ahead. But basically, it's like Sean's like, I know how to use that guy. Like, I have a plan for him. Like, let's do it. I love this guy. And there was some underlying data that suggested if he stayed healthy, he could be really good. And some of like the per snap stuff or whatever their analytics said. But like ultimately, they had a plan for him. And I don't know if their plan was 1,500 yards as a rookie. But they clearly that's the best version of their plan. And so I think that's something to remember as well. Is like, got to have plans for guys, which goes back to our,
initial discussion
featuring a guy that I saw outside earlier today. All right, that's Mitch Tischler. You can listen to him on the Beltway Football Podcast, which is available now wherever you get your podcasts. Of course, the Monumental Sports app as well. And when we get back, for about the 15th straight time in a row, I have no earthly idea what we're going to be doing. But for right now, let's get an update on the latest in the world of women's sports. It's presented by Wawa. Chicken how you wanna at Wawa with customizable, crispy, or roasted chicken sandwiches. just like that, we got 30 minutes to go from Indy. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube, too, at the Team 980. We are live at the Indianapolis NFL Scouting Combine. It's just the NFL Scouting Combine. I don't know why I keep calling it the Indianapolis NFL Combine. There's no other combine. It's the NFL Combine. We're in Indianapolis. That's where we are. So Adam Peters spoke through these blue curtains behind me. There's a bunch of podiums, and that's where Adam Peters was earlier today. And he was asked an interesting question, especially considering the question that I have been asking everyone that has come through and my answer to it, which is the question I basically asked is, like, is there anything about what the Commanders did this year that changed the way that you think about team building and the NFL? And my thing has been very much that culture matters even more than I thought. I would have probably said, like, schematic and talent stuff is huge, like being on the cutting edge of those things and making sure you're ahead of the game. And I think those things can matter, but they're also constantly shifting targets. And as long as you do what you do really well, I think that you can make a lot of different things work schematically and a lot of different roster builds and all those different types of things. But I think getting to the crux of, you have to know what you do well, and you have to have everybody moving in the same direction. And there's a bunch of different ways to do it, but you have to, and some may have higher ceilings, certainly than others, but like, I would rather have an inferior plan with superior buy-in and the right pieces making up what I'm trying to do that are the right for me, even if to others it may not look like, or they might not be the most universal pieces, then oh, that guy's the best player on the top 100 list of free agents, and that's the guy that all the mock drafts loved, and it's just a bunch of misfit toys. Or maybe I discount a player's character and how they compete and how they show up for work every day. It's the old, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. Like, we saw that come to life this year with the Washington Commanders. And so Adam Peters was asked, would you take on a guy who's got red flags, if you will? And obviously I think we'll see what Adam says, but it depends on what those red flags are. But, like, would you take on a guy with red flags because of the base and the culture that you've built in D.C.?
Yeah, I think you hit it right on, and that was one of the coolest things when we were going through this process last year, when I really got to know DQ and we saw everything, kind of, we were really aligned on everything, and that is a big thing for us, and finding the right people, and that's not just players, that's support staff, coaches, everybody. So that's always going to be at the core of what we do, and I've been a part of teams that when you start sacrificing that, then it usually doesn't work. And so, we've set out and really, I think what's really cool is in our exit interviews this year, we talked to a lot of players, and one of the biggest things that they hit on was we liked all the people you brought in, the players and the commanders and the competitors. And so don't lose sight of that. So we heard that from our players. We felt it ourselves. So that's always going to be at the core of what we do. And I mean, there may be an exception here or there, or you make a mistake and that not on purpose, but that's going to always be at the core of what we do.
I think that there are negotiables when it comes to that stuff, and there's non-negotiables. If a player, for instance, had an incident in college and you are comfortable with how they took accountability for that, and it is a potential character red flag of how they conduct themselves off the field, that's not something this organization wants to take on, I think, on principle, but also I think they're aware on the ownership side of, like, hey, we're still coming off of a lot of stuff. Like, this team was in front of Congress a couple years ago. We're not really looking to bring bad dudes into the community. But like, if someone were to have some kind of incident that suggests that there could be a character issue, but you can say, oh, you know what, they're 18 years old. This is not the end of the world. They take accountability. They made changes in their life to ensure that something like that wouldn't happen again. It might cause us a few bad headlines, but at the end of the day, like, this is not actually indicative of who this person now is and will be for us moving forward. That's one thing. I think that there are probably even on field maybe some character things that are non-conventional that you could take on. But I think at the core of the non-negotiables for them is who are you as a competitor and how responsible are you? And those things are obviously very related. How responsible are you to your teammates? Are you accountable? And all of that behind the are you competitive? Will you do what it takes to win? Are you and part of that is like not saying what I'll do whatever it takes and like, doing whatever, Instagram workout videos. Like, are you actually willing to put in the extra time to study? Are you actually willing to take a back seat at times, play a different role because it's what's best for the team? Like, how bad do you want it? I saw a really funny meme actually going around this weekend that is both funny societally and funny in this context to use as a comparison. But Anthony, there was a meme that I saw that was basically like it was a woman driving her car and it's like a thought bubble of maturity in marriage is realizing that when your husband says he would do anything for you, he meant fight dragons and stuff, not do the dishes or laundry. But like, if you want to actually be a good husband, let's say, like, and your wife is like, hey, will you just do the dishes? Like, that would make me happy. I'll do anything to make you happy. What about the dishes? Anything but that. What's that Meatloaf song? I'll do anything for love, but I won't do that. Like, are you competitive in that you want to win, or do you want to win your way? And I think that, like, to just absolutely torture this analogy, the Commanders want some guys that are willing to do some dishes. Like, if you're willing to do the dishes, like, we can work with you. We want that true competitor at the heart of it. Are you a dishes guy? Are you a laundry guy? I feel like you're good about your chores because you have to be because you got your own spot. No one else is going to do it for you.
Yeah, I do my dishes. I try to make sure my sink is empty by the time I go to sleep. I was always kind of bad about the sink. I'm not good about it at night, but in the morning, like when I go start making breakfast and putting things, that's when my time, my motivation to do that kind of stuff is higher in the morning for whatever reason. Anyway, it's not the point of the segment. Just fun facts aside about me and Anthony and how we go about our household chores. The point is, if there was a point, and a point that I can remember, the point is that when you look at a guy like Marshon Lattimore, right, I don't think he fits the Commander to a T, right? He's a little rough around the edges in terms of how he conducts his interviews in the media and things like that. And obviously the competitiveness on the field at times spills over in a way that I think DQ values composure at a higher level than Marshon Lattimore has displayed in his career, including in the playoff game against Mike Evans this year, and specifically against A.J. Brown this year when that spilled over. But there is a competitiveness to him that they were willing to take on that risk. And whatever the other parts of that spilling over were more in the negotiable side. Do they want a bunch of those dudes? No. Were they willing to take a bet on the talent? Yes. They're doubling down on that because they're not releasing him. They're not moving on from Marshon Lattimore, and he's a big part of their plans moving forward by everything that we've heard. But I do think it's worth wondering if they're wondering internally, we got to see how this goes. And I'm glad ultimately that Adam said what he said, which is when you start sacrificing these things, because the talent's too good to pass up. Until that talent is not available to you, or until that talent is only performing at 80% of their capacity because they don't compete in the way that you want. They don't work in the way that you want. And that's the thing with Lattimore is behind the scenes, the reports on him before he even started playing are he's great in the meeting rooms. He's helping the other guys before he even steps on the field with his knowledge. So it's just for him, it's really, can you contain it more on the field, and will you be more accountable when it spills over in ways that are not good and not helpful, in a way that he didn't in publicly taking accountability for those things. But at the core of it, when you're looking at free agents, when you're looking at the draft, I think they understand that old cliche that I mentioned earlier. Talent or hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. They want the guys that are going to work hard because then they know, let's say this guy is a 78 player on Madden. If we can get a 78 every single week, we can plan for 78 every single week. But if this guy's an 84, but sometimes he plays like an 84 and sometimes he plays like a 64, that's going to be a problem for us. And especially if it's something that we feel like he can control in terms of how he goes about his business, you don't want to make that sacrifice because
it then has an effect on the 78 player because he starts playing like a 72 because he's hanging around with the 84-64 guy too much. Like that kind of stuff is contagious. You want the level in your locker room to be high. You want the standard to be high, and I do think that will affect who is on their board when it comes draft time and who is obviously on the free agent board as we move into the start of league year here in just a couple of weeks. All right, when we get back, it is time for Real Things Real People Said into real microphones. But first, a final look at what's trending. All right, it's the Hoffman Show. We're wrapping up here on the Team 980. It's always fun. Anthony, this is like the thing that happens. I'll have to deal with this tomorrow. We're only on until 6 tomorrow because Terp's got a big game.
You're in there by yourself, aren't you?
I'm not by myself. It's actually not like crazy empty, but it definitely is like emptying out. We got because the thing is all the digital outlets are done. So like the athletics table is empty, the ringers table is empty. Let's see. I'm trying to see who else is over there. There's like TV station that's got set up over there. Like their table's empty. And then you got a lot of other radio stations that are done for the day. But like I got Kansas City's on to my right. I think Phoenix looks like they might be on in front of me. The Yahoo Sports folks just wrapped up. My guys over at ESPN 1000 Chicago, they're still over here. Then there's like a whole other side. There's people working over to the right. So, but it definitely is emptying out. When you're the afternoon show, Eastern time, I mean, I feel bad if you're like, you want to come out. Like, let's say you're covering, I'm trying to think of what team on the West Coast has a high pick. Like the Raiders or something like that.
Yep.
And you out here, like my guy Q Myers, who does a show in Vegas, like, his schedule has got to be that dude just doesn't leave this building all day. Because like everyone's around in the morning to tape stuff. It's like it's busiest in the morning, and then just peters off throughout the day. But I'm here in Indianapolis at the NFL Scouting Combine. We'll be here tomorrow. Tomorrow's show is insane. Anthony, I'm just gonna say all the people that I've got scheduled for tomorrow. And I don't know how many of these, because I will admit all of these are scheduled to tape before the show.
Oh, wow.
We're having Trevor Sikkema for Take Command.
Okay.
Mark Ross, who's been great with us, former Giants personnel executive now at the NFL Network. The great, the one, the only, Charles Davis.
Oh, yeah.
Lance Zierlein, who was one of my favorite conversations last year. Like if you go on NFL.com and you read their like player comparisons and their scouting profiles on NFL.com, Lance is the guy who writes those. And then the one that we will 100% have on the show tomorrow, because he is actually going to be live, is Rhett Lewis, who's a host and draft guy for NFL Network. He hosts their Path to the Draft show. But I believe it's his father played for Washington back in the day, so he's got burgundy and gold connections, which is fun. So we'll have Rhett Lewis on the show 4:30 tomorrow. We also I didn't get a chance to edit any of this because it's a 40-minute conversation that we didn't have time to play today. But it's worth saying. I had an awesome roundtable discussion with Brooke Pryor and Dan Pizzuta earlier today, and we just talked about a bunch of different stuff all around the league, trade trends, coaching staff size, and then team buildings type of stuff. So awesome conversation that I'll have up over the next couple of days on YouTube at Craig Hoffman and at the Team 980. And we'll play I think maybe we'll play like the trade discussion part on Friday. That was Pizzuta's contribution to the idea table. So we'll probably play that on Friday's show. But some of these interviews we'll play on Friday. I think we're going to have Cynthia Freeland this week as well. So plenty of good stuff to come here on the Team 980 from Indianapolis. With that, Anthony, any other housekeeping? I mean, today I should mention, for those that are tuning in late here, if you want to go back and check out the podcast feed, Jordan Reid from ESPN, Andrew Siciliano, former NFL Network, now play-by-play for the Cleveland Browns and NBC Sports. Who else? JP and Mitch all stopped by. So, did I miss anybody?
And Logan.
Oh, yeah, and then we got Logan and I got a fresh episode of Take Command that you can check out. And then Logan and I are recording with Sikkema tomorrow. So that's going to be fun. We've never done this before where, like, I'm going to be sitting here with Trevor, and then Logan's going to be on the computer screen. So I got to figure out how that's all going to look and make sure that we got all the tech. I got to text Trevor and be like, hey, make sure you bring some headphones. If not, I'm going to have to borrow somebody's headphones. But we'll, that's my problem, Anthony, and I'll figure it out. Other than that, any other housekeeping we should do?
I think that's it for the day. Oh, I mean, I guess you could note that the Lakers play the Mavs tonight.
Oh, yeah, there's great sports on TV tonight. I think 48 and I are going to grab dinner, and hopefully there's TVs because Unrivaled is on tonight.
Yes, sir.
And then the Lakers and Mavs play tonight. So Luka's first game back in Dallas.
Yes. I don't know if it's in Dallas. Let me see if it's in Dallas.
Oh, if it's at 10 o'clock, it's probably in LA.
Yeah.
But still, that'll be fun. Man, his first trip back to Dallas.
Yeah, it's in LA.
Because, like, typically the Mavs were really good about, you know, like back when I covered them 10 years ago when I lived down there, like, if a guy had been a player and came back, like, they were good about, like, the tribute videos and all that kind of stuff. But because of the way that things went down, like, will the owner and the GM be like, no tribute video? That would be so stupid. And, like, you know, the PA announcer, like, do they do his old introduction on the PA for one time? Like, they should. He took them to the finals.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah. Interesting is one word for it.
Do you think he goes for, like, a crazy stat line? Do you think he's going for 30, 15, 10?
I also think that, like, LeBron and the Lakers will feed that.
Yeah.
Like, they will be like, you're going to go absolutely bananas. Speaking of J.J. Redick and the Lakers, let's get to real things real people said in real microphones.
Real things.
We're not going to be sucked this year.
Real people.
5-11, not very good.
Said into real microphones.
You know, the culture is actually damn good.
So Luka Doncic had 4 steals over the weekend, which prompted Lakers coach J.J. Redick, his former teammate, of course, to say this.
Luka, it's good to have you back. Yes, it's good to have you back. First team all defense. First team all defense.
First team all defense. Anthony, is there any of the other ones that we can play real quick here in the final few minutes of the show? Or / final few seconds of the show?
Jimmy, I guess we got Jimmy.
Jimmy Butler, everybody. No further setup.
First game is a dub. It's always good. Now I got to find somewhere to live because I got nowhere to live out here.
That is something that is very, very real. If you get traded mid-season, like, I guess he had the All-Star break, but he had to go do All-Star stuff. And the All-Star break was in the Bay, but he probably had, I don't know, finding a place to live is hard. Then you got to move. It's big responsibility.
And it's the Bay.
And it's the Bay. Yeah, well, he got the money. All right, that's our show. We'll see you tomorrow.